Taking the life of one's children is not just a heinous criminal offense. Such a desperate step can be pushed by a woman's altered consciousness under strong substances or by a painful psycho-emotional state when the body cannot cope with stress. The high-profile case of Veronica Youngblood has become a vivid and horrible example of how disturbed psyche, unhealthy relationships, and constant stress can lead to irreversible consequences. Veronica committed a terrible crime, but at the trial, the young woman claimed that, despite what she had done, she had always been a good mother and wished her children only good. This story evokes both anger and pity, but to understand what exactly pushed Veronica to such a terrible and inhumane act, you need to look back a few decades and see what she had to go through. Perhaps her own childhood traumas played no small part in this, but this does not absolve her of responsibility. Veronica Youngblood's abusive childhood. Veronica Youngblood, maiden name Castro, was born in 1986 in the suburbs of Santa Rosa in central Argentina. She was the eldest of two daughters in the family and was raised with her sister Mayra, who was born in 1988. The girl's childhood was poor and full of hardship, but not even hunger and lack of basic necessities was the worst. Her parents did not work anywhere, abused alcohol, and took their anger out on their eldest daughter, beating her almost daily, sometimes to such an extent that she could not walk. Grandfather also did not harbor any warm feelings for his own granddaughters, considering them extra hungry mouths that need to be fed. From an early age, Veronica got used to the fact that she had nowhere to wait for protection and support. She felt superfluous in her own family, and the only truly close person to her was only her younger sister. When the girl was 14 years old, her parents divorced and separated. Her father was not interested in the fate of his daughters, but her mother, who was actively trying to organize her personal life, did not need children. Veronica was forced to become an escort to support herself and her younger sister without any education because she saw no other way out. At the age of 15, she became pregnant, and at the age of 16, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter Sharon. She never gave her eldest daughter's father's name, and probably didn't know it herself, having gotten pregnant by one of her many clients, a follower of a strange cult. As a teenager, without support and help, the girl joined a rather strange South American religious cult called Umbanda. It was a combination of heterogeneous beliefs and cult positions, among which were the foundations of Catholicism, spiritualism, and African cults. In Umbanda, it is customary to honor spirit guides who are able to communicate with the souls of dead people. The followers of the cult also believe in reincarnation and spiritual development through various practices. Veronica, being an impressionable and driven girl, was quickly imbued with the peculiarities of this belief, and according to the memories of her younger sister, she herself began to believe that she could make contact with spirits and communicate with the dead. Veronica did talk about hearing voices and seeing dreams, and also believed that after death, the soul of each person is reborn for a better life. Most likely, such a specific religious cult was fertile ground for the development of mental illness, given Veronica's difficult childhood and her own parents' abuse of her. The other followers of the cult treated her with kindness and love, which is what she lacked the most, so she believed literally every word they told her, moving to the United States, meeting Ronald Youngblood. When exactly Veronica decided to move to the United States of America, it is not known, but it happened in the late 2000s, when she was a little more than 20 years old. Taking her young daughter, she settled in Hampton Roads, in the state of Virginia. There, the attractive young woman took a job with an escort service company. In late 2008, Veronica met a guy whose name was Ronald Youngblood. He was a few years older than her and served as a pilot in the U.S. Navy. He and Veronica first met when Ronald used the services of the company she worked for. Apparently, Ronald was immediately attracted to this young person because he himself expressed a desire to continue to communicate. Soon he insisted that Veronica left the escort, after which they began to live together. And in 2009, in one of the chapels in Las Vegas, the couple officially legalized their relationship, arranging a modest ceremony without guests. After the wedding, Veronica's life became stable for the first time, and she was not afraid to look into the future and confidently made plans. She had her own home, a caring husband with a stable job who fully provided for her, while Veronica could be engaged in creating home comfort. But most importantly, Ronald took her daughter Sharon as his own, surrounding her with care and love. In 2013, the couple had their common child, daughter Brooklyn. The couple was over the seventh heaven from happiness, and the eldest heiress was happy that she had a baby sister, Sharon Youngblood. After the wedding, Ronald gave Veronica and her oldest daughter his last name, although officially the child he did not adopt. Nevertheless, the girl called him Daddy and reached out to him. Ronald himself tried not to deny her anything, paid attention, and engaged in the upbringing of the child. Sharon grew up quite bright, sociable, and purposeful girl. She studied well in school, had a lot of friends, was active and friendly. From an early age, she was involved in sports, was a member of the school cheerleading team, played tennis. But the girl achieved the greatest success in figure skating. Coach, who worked with Sharon, noted how easy and at ease she felt on the ice, as if in his native element. In childhood and adolescence, she regularly participated in various figure skating competitions, where she repeatedly won prizes. She was prophesied a brilliant sports career, noting the tenacity and diligence of the young figure skater. But alas, it was not destined to come true. Unstable family life. After several years of living together, the relationship between Ronald and Veronica began to deteriorate. Both spouses had difficult characters. They were excessively emotional and unyielding. If at first they managed to find compromises, then now neither of them did not want to make concessions. Moreover, the spouses began to do many things to each other for evil, because of which between them often began to erupt scandals with violent clarification of relations, mutual accusations, and insults. In addition, Ronald was very jealous and overbearing. If before the wedding he promised to forget about what his chosen one used to do, now he reminded her of it, every chance he got. He said that he pulled her out of the mud, provided for her, took her child, and now he demands to live by his rules. Family quarrels began to escalate into physical assaults, with the husband and wife taking turns to be the instigators of the fights. The police received complaints of domestic violence from both sides, but in most cases, these reports were soon withdrawn, and the spouses continued to live together. To be fair, the children were not involved in their parents' squabbles and were never physically hurt, although their emotional state can only be guessed at. In 2014, Ronald was sent to Central America, to the Republic of Honduras for duty, and his family followed him. During this period, relations between the spouses became very acute. Veronica complained to the local police that her husband was raising his hand against her, restricting her finances by blocking her card and forbidding her to use the internet and car. Ronald later said in his defense that he did so because he found out that his spouse was cheating on him. The husband thought that by depriving his wife of money, personal transportation, and the ability to communicate with her lover, he would keep her at home. As a result, Veronica filed a complaint with the U.S. Embassy and had her husband extradited from Honduras and returned to the United States. However, this incident did not affect his career, and he was soon transferred to Washington, D.C., to the main department of the country's Navy. However, relations between the couple finally soured. Breakup and ongoing conflicts. In 2016, the spouses moved to Florida, the place of Ronald's new appointment. By that time, they had already virtually separated, but continued to live together under one roof, and Ron still fully supported Veronica and daughters. By the beginning of 2017, the family moved again, this time to the small town of Oakton, which is in the state of Virginia, where the spouses began the official divorce process. But even during the dissolution of marriage, Ron and Veronica did not separate. They lived in the same house, although apparently they simply could not stand each other anymore. Both later claimed that no matter what, they wanted to raise children together, but in fact, Veronica had no source of income and could not even rent a room for herself. The issue of future custody of the children became especially acute, and Veronica realized that she would not be able to raise the children on her own because they were all completely dependent on Ronald. He also realized this and did not miss the opportunity to remind his wife of this, sometimes descending to outright blackmail, which brought the young woman to hysterics. At some point, driven to despair, Veronica decided to take a loan from the bank to have at least some of their own funds. However, as a guarantor, she specified her still legal husband without informing him. When Ronald received a call from the bank, another scandal broke out. Naturally, he refused to act as guarantor, and the actions of his wife became for him another reason to humiliate her. True, a couple of months later, the couple was finally able to agree, and the scandals between them for a while subsided. According to the court decision, they could continue to live together, and together bring up their children, while neither of them will be charged alimony. But that truce didn't last long. In the fall of 2017, Ronald filed a lawsuit against Veronica, accusing her of aggressive and inadequate behavior. He stated that the spouse smashed his smartphone, launching it into the wall, drowned in a basin of water with a working laptop, and also smashed the windshield of his car with a stone. After that, Veronica was obliged to move out and forbade her to go near Ron. At the same time, the youngest daughter, Brooklyn, was temporarily given full custody of her father until the next court hearing. 3 weeks later, the divorce proceedings were finalized, but having received a certificate of divorce, the former spouses began to live together again and, it seemed, even reconciled. Courts and custody battle. About 6 months later, the former spouses appeared in court together again, but this time they provided a multi-page agreement detailing their plan for custody of their shared daughter. All the matter is that Ronald was transferred to the state of Missouri and the former wife and children moved with him. But before Veronica wanted to officially settle a number of nuances regarding the custody of their daughter, Brooklyn. The agreement stated that Ronald would provide his ex-wife with housing that would be close to his home so they could raise their daughter together. The court approved the document in April 2018, and the move itself was scheduled for August of that year. But a month later, Veronica unexpectedly changed her decision and went to court again. The young woman turned for help to a lawyer, who had to confidently draw up and make a number of changes to the previously approved agreement. Veronica said she was doing this because of changed circumstances. By then, she had finished her nursing school training and had been offered a job in Oakton with a good salary. That way, she could more or less support herself and the girls, and there was no need to move after her ex-husband. In addition, the new job promised to help her find and pay for her own place to live. Due to her new circumstances, Veronica now sought full custody of her daughter Brooklyn, which she specified in an amendment to the agreement. The new hearing was held in July 2018, a month before the previously scheduled departure to Missouri. But the court refused to make any changes to the previously approved agreement, and the former spouses were to move to another state to share custody of their shared daughter, as previously agreed. Veronica seemed to agree with the court's decision, as she made no further attempt to challenge it. 2 weeks after the last court hearing, Ronald filed a legal notice with his new address where he would live after the move, which was less than a month away. Only a few minor details needed to be finalized, and he was on his way. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but Sharon and Brooklyn had only days to live. Disturbing call. Toward evening, on August 5, 2018, emergency services received a disturbing call from 15-year-old Sharon. The girl was crying and gasping in pain. She begged to be saved and talked about how much she wanted to live. She said she was badly injured, and when the cameraman asked what had happened, she said she had just been shot with a gun by her own mother. According to Sharon, she and her younger sister were asleep when their mom walked into the room and shot Brooklyn. At the sound of the gunshot, the older sister woke up and was literally numb with fear. She asked her mom, "What are you doing?" Veronica replied that she was taking her daughters to God. Sharon tried to run away, but Veronica shot her in the back. With her last strength, she made it to the next room, where she locked herself in and called emergency services. The operator assured Sharon that help was on its way and asked her to hold on for a few more minutes, but then he heard the girl screaming in despair, followed by another gunshot. Then there was a frightening silence and the call was cut off. The police and paramedics arrived on the scene by 10 o'clock in the evening, and a horrifying picture was revealed before them. By this time, Ronald, who was on business in another city, had also called the emergency services, asking them to send someone to his house immediately because his ex-wife, according to him, might have done something terrible. Veronica had already called him and told him everything, but Ron refused to believe in the truth of her words. Sharon was the first to be found lying on the floor with 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the back. Amazingly, despite the massive blood loss, she still had a faint pulse and was desperately clinging to life. Sharon was quickly taken to the intensive care unit of the nearest hospital, but despite the efforts of doctors, the next day, she died. Brooklyn's breathless body was discovered in her bedroom, in her own bed. She had been killed by a single gunshot to the head. The girl's father arrived about an hour later, rushing home as fast as he could. But Veronica's whereabouts remained unknown until the emergency services received another call from one Manuel Bellows, who reported Veronica's whereabouts. Who is Manuel? Manuel was one of the lawyers the young woman consulted with in the spring of 2018 regarding custody of her youngest daughter. Veronica, as the lawyer later argued in court, immediately struck him as a rather serious, collected, and responsible young woman fighting for custody of her beloved daughters. In addition, she was very attractive in appearance, divorced, and not in a relationship at the time. The two soon hit it off, quickly developing into a tumultuous love affair. Only a few months later, Manuel noticed some oddities in her behavior, which alerted him in particular it was the religious views of Veronica and her frightening statements about the upcoming meeting with God. At the end of July, Veronica called Manuel and invited him to her home, saying that they needed to have a serious talk. When he arrived, the young woman was home alone. Her ex-husband and children were staying with Ronald's relatives. The lights were off in the house, but candles were burning everywhere, creating a romantic atmosphere, and there was a dinner for 2 on the table. She confided in him that she had lost the nursing position she had been looking forward to and had refused to move to another state because of it. Veronica also shocked her boyfriend with the news that she was pregnant by him. This information was later unconfirmed. Manuel did not know how to react to this, and Veronica tried to seduce him and inclined him to intimacy. According to Manuel, nothing happened between them that night because he felt a strange discomfort and threat coming from Veronica, as if his life was in danger. He asked her for time to think about how to proceed, and then hurriedly left her house. On the evening of August 5th, Manuel heard someone ring the doorbell at his house. He opened the door and saw Veronica on the doorstep. She was frighteningly calm, and there was no emotion on her face at all. Veronica asked to be let into the house, but before Manuel could do so, he saw a gun in her hands, and he was scared shitless. He said he would call the police if she did not leave immediately, but Veronica, with the same stony face, replied that he could do so since she no longer cared. She then added that she had killed her daughters, so the police were already looking for her anyway. After these words, Manuel got really scared. He closed the door and hurried to the phone. While Veronica went back to the rental car, she came in and just waited to be arrested. The arrest and the full picture of the crime. When the police arrived at Manuel's house, Veronica was sitting in the car in the driver's seat, and next to her, in the passenger seat, lay the loaded gun she had used hours earlier to shoot her daughters. The young woman did not resist. There was still no emotion on her face. In addition to the gun, 2 more full magazines were found in the car. Already at the station, Veronica confessed that she had bought the gun 10 days ago at an exhibition in order to kill her daughters and then take her own life. According to her, she decided to take this desperate step to take revenge on her ex-husband and prevent him from taking their common daughter, Brooklyn. She also added that her personal life didn't work out and she became depressed. Apparently, the eldest daughter noticed the strange behavior of her mother and suspected something wrong because a few days before the tragedy, she directly asked her if she was going to kill them. But what the mother answered her remains a mystery. In the afternoon, on August 5th, Veronica gave her daughters sweets, in which she had previously mixed sleeping pills so that the girls would not resist. When they went to their room and fell asleep, the mother took out a prepared gun, loaded it, and went to her daughters. First, she went to Brooklyn's crib, put the gun to her head, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot woke up Sharon, who didn't immediately realize what was happening, and asked her mother about it. Veronica replied that she would take her and her sister to God, then pointed the gun at her eldest daughter. But Sharon jumped out of bed, rushing to the door, and was immediately shot in the back. She managed to run to the next room and call for help while her mother tried to open the door. When Veronica did enter the room, Sharon screamed and took a second bullet to the chest. Veronica then called her ex-husband and told him what she had done and was now going to take her own life as well. She blamed Ronald for everything, saying that she hated him and that he had ruined her life. However, the young woman then changed her mind about leaving her life for some reason and went to her boyfriend's house, where she was arrested. Youngblood fully admitted her guilt, and when she was asked what punishment she would give herself, the woman said that it should be the death penalty. It is noteworthy that in the state of Virginia, such a measure has not been practiced for a long time, and Veronica knew about it. Trial and sentencing. Initially, the defendant refused the services of a lawyer and fully admitted her guilt. But then, she abruptly changed her testimony and decided to use the help of a public defender. She later claimed that she heard voices ordering her to do this to her daughters, and she complied. Veronica also said that she had a harsh childhood, from which she remembered only beatings and hunger, and that her ex-husband had finally killed her belief that there was anything good waiting for her in life. She added that she did not want the same fate to befall her daughters. The trial took a long time because Veronica refused to leave her cell to attend the sessions. In addition, she attempted to commit suicide several times, but did so in such a way that she was saved each time and did not cause any serious harm to herself. The defense lawyer tried to convince the court that his client suffers from a mental disorder developed against the background of childhood traumas, the influence of a religious cult, and the abuse of her ex-husband. The defense lawyer also argued that Veronica was in an insane state at the time of the crime and did not realize her actions. But despite all the efforts of the lawyer, the court saw in the actions of the woman cold calculation, because she had purchased weapons in advance, fed the children sweets with sleeping pills, and then proceeded to implement her terrible plan. Her actions were not spontaneous. They could not be written off as a state of affect or a sharp aggravation of mental disorder. The final verdict in the case was handed down in March 2023. Veronica was found guilty and sentenced to 78 years in prison. In fact, this term will be a life sentence for her. It is worth noting that many people found Ronald's behavior in court strange. He did not look like a grief-stricken father, and when his former wife, sobbing, testified, he smirked. After the verdict, he only remarked that he was quite happy with the outcome. No one knows what awaits him or her behind the next turn of fate. We naively plan our lives, dreaming that we will enter a prestigious university, and after graduation, we will get a high-paying job. Later, we will meet a worthy life partner, create a strong family with him, provide our children with a better future, and die in a deep old age in the circle of relatives and friends. This is probably everyone's dream. The success of some only spurs us on, gives us an incentive to live better. But what if things go differently than we expected? As we grow up, we take off our rose-colored glasses, and the clod of adult problems grows every year. It is only how we deal with it that shapes us as a person. From Angela Stalt's memoir on her website, I was born in Bangkok, Thailand, into a military family. My parents raised me with love and respect. I was disciplined but never abused by them. The woman was born in 1972. At the time of the events, she was just over 40 years old. Due to her father's work, the family often had to move around without staying in one place for long periods of time. As soon as the girl got used to the new school and had time to make friends, another move was planned. Angela lived in constant worry and anxiety. The woman's poor health also contributed to her hardships. Angela had been diagnosed with a thyroid disease, for which she had to take maintenance medication for the rest of her life. The disease depressed her mental and emotional state. However, Angela wanted to live and love like all other people. Gradually, her family settled in Georgia. Angela went to high school, where she still had difficulty adjusting. To fit in, she began to socialize with the first company that accepted her. Unfortunately, They were kids from dysfunctional families. There, she met a guy who was 3 years older than Angela and was already in his first year of college. After a year of studying, Angela made the decision to drop out of school and live with a young man. When I was 15 years old and living in Georgia, I married a very abusive man who kept me away from my parents. In addition to being treated like a prisoner, I was regularly punched and choked. Twice, as I recall, he used CPR to bring me to consciousness after choking me. I had broken ribs, a dislocated jaw, numerous bruises. My voice box was damaged and my windpipe was crushed. After 5 years of torment, I found a way to escape from him. At that time, I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder, and depression. I started taking antidepressants. After the breakup, Angela married a second time fairly quickly. Once again, she found herself trapped with another dominant man. At that point, she was in her early 20s. In 1996, a son was born to the couple, and all would have been nothing, except that the man was not known for his mild temper and also beat the young woman. This exacerbated my symptoms of PTSD, anxiety disorder, and depression. At this time, I started taking a highly addictive drug, Angela recalls. The former lovers eventually broke up and the baby's father disappeared. Angela was left alone with the baby in her arms. Since she never finished school, Angela had few jobs and no profession, and having a baby in her arms made it difficult to find a job. All she could think of in this situation was to find a man to take responsibility for both of them. Around the age of 25, she remarried. From her third marriage, 2 more children were born, a boy and a girl. Despite her health condition and unstable psyche, the woman cherished her family and brought up her children. However, time was ruthless, and for this marriage. In 2011, the man left the family. Later, Angela also claimed that her former spouse was no different from the previous ones. He was a manipulator and a toxic man. According to her, this is what caused the breakup. Now Angela was left alone with 3 children. One thing was good. The older children could already provide for themselves, but Angela had no other stable income except for social payments from the state. She had enough for a modest life, but she wanted to live better. Money decides everything. Probably everyone has heard this expression many times. They are an indicator of prosperity and wealth of a person. They serve as a kind of criterion of his mental abilities, luck, and judgment. However, not everyone knows how to earn them. Some are simply not given. Someone prefers to sit and do nothing while waiting for receipts from outside. Someone and does something, even trying, but gets a little, and maybe wrongly disposing of them. There is another category of people who love money and wait for it, the so-called lovers of easy money. But sooner or later there comes a moment when you have to pay the bills. In 2007, Angela and her family moved to Florida, a suburb of Daytona Beach, and settled near a young couple with children. They turned out to be James Schaefer and Candy Medina. The families quickly became friends with each other. The young people supported Angela in difficult times and often visited each other. On April 2nd, 2013, James said goodbye to Candy as he was going to his next appointment. She was sleeping sweetly in her bed with her children. That night, Candy saw her lover for the last time. Missing persons flyers described James as being about 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing about 275 pounds. He had brown eyes, brown hair. Distinguishing features included several tattoos, one that read Gringo on his neck, a Metallica skull on his right calf, and NCC on his right forearm. The last time he was seen, he was wearing work clothes that consisted of a black shirt, black pants, and black shoes, the standard dress code for a limousine driver. James Schaefer was born in 1976 and grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, USA. He had a fairly large and close-knit family. He grew up together with his brother and sister, whose names were Christian and Andrew. The guy was fond of sports since childhood, highlighting baseball the most. After graduating from high school, together with his girlfriend Candy went in search of a better life in Florida. The couple was in a relationship for a long time, had 4 children. There was a relaxed atmosphere in the family. Each member of the family was loved. The main financial burden fell on the head of the family, James. Therefore, the guy got a job that brought a good income. The local company was engaged in the service of festive events, as well as private transportation of wealthy clients. The firm provided limousines and other expensive cars for rent. James got along with his colleagues, was polite and tactful with customers, and in good standing with the management. Time passed. It would seem that having a decent income, the financial well-being of the family should only grow, but instead, for several months in a row, the couple owed rent on the house. They even had their water turned off. The landlords were threatening to evict James and Candy soon. This kept James on his toes, looking for ways to stay off the streets. He had to do something about it. On that unfortunate night, James left his home to take a company-provided automobile. The man was to drive a group of people from Kissimmee, Florida, to Tampa, and then back. The drive was to take no more than 2 hours. James arrived at work around 3 a.m., picked up the vehicle, and left to complete the assignment, but never returned home. Candy became worried as a lot of time had passed and James never made contact. Later, strange messages started coming from him saying that he needed to disappear for a period of time. The poor woman didn't understand anything. Candy began calling family and friends in the hope of finding out where James was and what had happened to him. And on April 4th, the father of the missing man decided to contact the police to report his son's disappearance. On April 21, 2013, the sheriff's office received a call from a woman who said she knew someone who might be involved in James's death. She claimed that James Schaefer was not missing or a runaway. He was murdered. The witness blamed it on her own sister. The woman said her relative had attacked the man and now she was going to kill him. Allegedly, at a family meeting, her sister confessed to everyone about killing her best friend under the influence of illegal substances. The caller was then forced to contact the police as she was worried about her demented sister's children. After James's father reported James to the police, the detectives immediately began their investigation. First, they decided to talk to Candy. Perhaps she knew something about her loved one's disappearance or had been causing wariness lately. Candy reported that her husband had gone to work, and nothing in his behavior seemed suspicious to her, except perhaps the messages that came from James and messengers after his disappearance. It later turned out that several other people in the family's inner circle had received similar texts. This information required investigation. The management of the company where James worked explained that the worker was indeed listed as one of the best employees, and such a sudden disappearance was not like him. They helped detectives clarify the time and reconstruct some of the events of that day. James arrived at work to pick up his car, got it ready to leave, and left around 4 a.m. However, the police still managed to find out something interesting. Employees of the firm said that shortly before his disappearance, James complained about financial problems and asked to borrow money. It is quite possible that this could be the reason for his disappearance. The man could have left the city to disappear from unfulfilled obligations and creditors. It was established that James had a gambling addiction. This explained his financial problems and utility and rent arrears. Detectives took this fact as a primary basis, so they continued to contact family relatives and friends. That's how police officers found themselves on the doorstep of James and Candy's friend and neighbor, Angela Stold. Angela greeted the police officers calmly, telling them that she was saddened by the disappearance of James, who was indeed her friend. He often stopped by her place after his shift for a drink, a heart-to-heart chat, and to relax. They had purely platonic feelings for each other. When Angela was having financial problems, she approached James asking for help, to which he offered to let her do his personal bookkeeping. When asked why his wife wasn't doing it, Angela replied that there was nothing strange about it. Thus, they helped each other. She would get a small reward for the work she did, and he would get his affairs in order. Initially, everything was fine, but at one point he started having financial problems. He wanted to get social support from the state. That's why he decided to involve Angela, so their friendly relationship turned into a dependent relationship on each other. After communicating with Angela, the police officers could not get away from the idea that there was something suspicious about Angela having access to James's accounts. Several transactions that had been made after the man's disappearance raised questions, and their meetings in the mornings after work raised some doubts about the fidelity of the missing man. So the police decided to take a closer look at the family friend. Angela seemed sincere, relaxed. There was no particular reason not to believe her after all. People often ask someone close to them to do the bookkeeping or hire specialists, so Stolt was ruled out as a suspect. Once established, it seemed obvious that James's flight was due to financial problems or something similar. There was money involved in the case. Investigators went to Angela's house again, but this time they decided to do more than just talk outside the house. They also asked to see her home. But what appeared before their eyes threw the representatives of law enforcement agencies into confusion. All the rooms were littered with garbage. Dirty plates with leftovers were everywhere. The leftovers were spoiled, and it all stank. In short, it was unsanitary. It was clear that Angela had some kind of mental problems. However, they did not find James here. This is how Angela tells it. Because of my illness and injuries, I have not been able to properly clean or maintain my house for a long time. The police asked Angela to take part in the formal interrogation, which would be audio recorded. She repeated everything she had said earlier. She also said that her buddy was not addicted to substances, but was an occasional user, with some prescription drugs involved. For James, she said, it was an opportunity to relax on the weekends. Angela also said that the last time she saw the man was after he was reported missing. He came to her home and asked for money, to which she replied that she would not give him $1. The response angered the man, however, he left her home. The police also asked Angela to make a call to James, to explain the situation with the bills, to inform him that there is a big overspend, and that it could turn into something bad, to which she refused, citing the fact that he was no longer in contact with her. Angela also told about the problems at James' work, that someone from the staff threatened him, asking him to return a debt, so the detective's interest shifted to James's co-workers and his boss. A sudden call on April 21, 2013, made adjustments to the investigation of the case. The information could not be ignored. Once again, the detectives went to Angela Stolt, except that there was no trace left of the calm and balanced woman. They were met on the doorstep by a woman who clearly hadn't looked after herself in days. Her hair was sloppy. She seemed to be out of sorts. Her behavior was also inadequate, which was the reason she was deemed dangerous, both to herself and to society. On this basis, Angela was taken into custody, and later she was sent to a psychiatric hospital for 72 hours for the necessary evaluation. Before she was placed in the hospital, she spent some time under arrest at the local police department. So it was established that on April 3, 2013, she picked up James Schaefer from work after completing an order. James was alarmed. He needed to fix the situation or his family would be evicted from the house. Either he and his children would be left on the street, or they would have to move back in with their parents, which wasn't an option either. In addition, he did not want to admit to himself and his family that his difficult financial situation was caused by gambling. He was so eager to win back what he had lost. But luck had turned away from James, and there was no one else to turn to at work. It was embarrassing in front of his co-workers. He'd always repaid his debts before, but now things were going wrong. Maybe Angela will help out, and if not, I'll ask her father to help. He helped me out once before, and I paid him back all my debts on time, James pondered. Angela suggested they come in and have a glass of a mixture of peach schnapps and vodka. And for more peace of mind, let's add something else. It'll help you relax, Angela suggested. James was fine with the drug, which, by the way, was only available by prescription. He even crushed the pills himself so that they would dissolve faster and enhance the effect of the alcohol. After drinking a glass, James asked his friend if her father could lend him an amount between $2,000 and $4,000. James knew that his friend's father was seriously ill and literally on the verge of death. Therefore, he himself needed money for treatment, but his situation was desperate. How can he ask such a thing, especially now? He already owes me money. I can barely make ends meet. Angela was indignant, but she didn't let on. You'll have to ask your father about that, Angela replied. James then offered to give her a ride to her parents' house so that she wouldn't have to stall and find out as soon as possible. Hope for a speedy resolution to the trouble settled in his heart. Around 5 a.m., they set out on the road. Since it was still early, Angela's father was asleep, and the woman had changed her mind about going to him She suggested stopping the car near the cemetery located in Dayton. No one expected what happened afterward. At least that's what Angela told the police. I took James to my favorite place in Dayton, which turned out to be the cemetery, to talk to him alone. I knew he would scream, and I didn't want my kids to be abused anymore. They were being terrorized by their father, and they didn't need any more of that. So, when we parked, we turned around in our seats facing each other with our backs against the doors, Angela recalled. She told James that she would not borrow money for him from her father, much less force him to take out loans for that purpose, and that she would stop doing his bookkeeping after they sorted out the bills and Social Security payments. Maul. Enough of him setting her up. Jason became enraged, started screaming and grabbed her by the throat. He screamed, "I'm going to kill you! You can't do that! It's my money!" I grabbed my cell phone that was on the console. He threw it into the back seat of my car, continuing his tirade. Angela describes his condition. According to her, he threatened that he would kill her children as well. Stolt took these threats seriously. To defend herself, she grabbed the first thing she could get her hands on from the trunk. That tool turned out to be an ice axe, which she carried with her as camping and hiking equipment. Angela struck James and hit him in the eye, but he wasn't dead. He was completely disoriented. James began to scream. Angela then took a PVC cord that she used on hikes to climb trees. Wrapping the cord around her roommate's throat, she rested her feet on the back of the driver's seat and began pulling hard on his neck. After a while, the man stopped moving. Angela pulled the ice pick out of the victim's right eye. When asked by the police about where in the car such equipment came from, the neighbor explained that she and her family were going to go camping in the next month. All these gadgets were necessary for her, and she was just storing them in the car. Everyone at Angela's interrogation was horrified. In fact, James hadn't asked for anything supernatural. She could have refused him and stopped communicating with him further. Moreover, they believed that there might not have been any threats from James at all, and that Angela's mental state had played a cruel joke on her. A medical examination later showed that Angela was aware of her own actions during the incident. The police also did not rule out that the crime could have been planned in advance. Firstly, the strange accessories in the car were questionable. Secondly, why leave the house to just talk when it could have been done in front of witnesses? To which Angela also had an answer. I knew he had some violent tendencies in the past, but he had never been violent towards me before. If I thought he was going to use physical force, I wouldn't have taken him to a place where I was in danger. I would have taken him to some public place. He almost killed me. Things could have easily gone differently, and I wouldn't have put myself in that situation. When it was over, Angela was very frightened. According to her, she was in shock, but that didn't stop her from stabbing the other eye again to make sure James was dead. But the gruesome story didn't end there. To avoid getting blood splattered on her car, she wrapped the dead man in a plastic bag. When he finally let go of me, I realized he was dead, got out of the car, and I threw up. It took quite a while before I could breathe, and then I was faced with a new kind of horror. I was on autopilot, my mind strangely shut down, and I just started doing something. I went back to the car to get my cell phone to call the police, but I couldn't find it. So I covered it up as best I could and drove to the police station. As I drove down Fort Smith Boulevard, I panicked, the thoughts going through my head telling me that the police would never believe me. My life was over. I would lose my children. I kept looking at him and the fear kept building. Anyway, with James' corpse, Angela arrived home. After that, she dragged the body to the shed. Here, taking a hacksaw, she began to cut it into pieces. The severed body fragments, Angela decided to put them into pots and pans, oiling them. A remarkable fact is that when Angela first spoke to the police about James's disappearance, his body parts were just being boiled in pots and pans. However, this went unnoticed as the investigators did not enter the house that time. When police first entered Angela's home, Stolt had already completely dismembered the body. She packed the individual parts into garbage bags and scattered them in different parts of the city. Some sources say that she was assisted in this by her older children, whom she told that she had accidentally hit a deer on the road. At the same time, she strictly forbade them to enter the shed so that they would not see the evidence of the crime. Following this confession, Angela was arrested for second-degree murder. police officers actively searched for James's posture. Out of 206 bones, they were only able to locate 56. James Schaefer was buried in a closed casket. None of his relatives could bid him a proper farewell. Afterwards, the prosecutor's office upgraded the crime to first-degree murder because many facts pointed to a premeditated act. In addition, Angela tried to get rid of the body, covering her tracks, which wanted to confuse the investigation. Investigators believed that the woman's plan was well thought out and also included misinformation of James's relatives. For this purpose, she used his cell phone, from which she wrote to his wife and family, as well as some friends. On December 2nd, 2014, Angela Stalt went on trial. The woman immediately confessed to the murder, but insisted that she did it as a result of self-defense. The prosecutor's office tried to refute her words, as the main motive was considered to be money. Angela had been in financial trouble for most of her life, making her fearful that James would cheat and use her. That morning, when they had been drinking with James, the woman had clearly had too much to drink. Her anger at him, at life, and at the injustice of the men around her spilled out into an assault. On December 5th, 2014, the jury retired to deliberate on the verdict. After deliberating, they unanimously found Angela guilty of first-degree murder, as well as abuse of the body, tampering with evidence. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. What was going on in Angela's head is hard to imagine. A sick mind, a sick body, a tortured soul. However, apparently Angela still doesn't realize what she has done. She didn't just take the life of a man she considered her best friend. She brutalized him without giving him a single chance for salvation. And after all, like a butcher butchering a carcass, she dismembered James and boiled him in a pot. Money had ruined more than one friendship, but to do it this way, you'd better stay away from friends like that. Today we are going to visit India. India is the only country in the world where cultural and religious traditions have not been interrupted since ancient times, which is probably why it attracts tourists from all over the planet. But in our story, we will look at India like a coin that has a different image on each side. On April 20th, 2018, at dawn, two young men went fishing down the river toward a mangrove forest. They took a long boat ride downstream until they reached a remote and quiet place. One of them jumped into the water to tie up the boat, but his attention was distracted by a pungent, acrid odor that was very close by. They went ashore and followed the odor. Curiosity led them to a horrifying find. There was something that looked like a human body hanging on a tree branch, and a skull lying nearby. The guys abandoned the boat and rushed to the nearest village to report the terrible find. A team of investigators, forensic experts, and police officers urgently arrived on the spot. The experts confirmed that the suspended body was indeed human. It was obvious that it had been hanging for a long time and had already begun to decompose. The flesh on the arms and legs had torn off. The skull was found nearby. Next to the body were packs of cigarettes, packaged drinking water, and a lighter, which probably belonged to the victim. An investigation was conducted at the scene the same morning. The evidence found was seized, and the remains were sent for examination. The modest remnants of clothing that could be identified on the victim were identified. Liga Skromane, a 33-year-old hiker, was the victim of an accident. But who is Liga Skromane, and what happened to her on the riverbank? Liga Skromane was born in Latvia in 1986. She grew up in a large and friendly family, had an older brother and a younger sister. The sisters were very friendly, and from childhood shared all joys and hardships with each other. Growing up, Liga moved to Ireland, but always maintained close relations with her family. It was in Ireland that she met Andrew Jordan. It was not love at first sight, as the modest Liga had difficulty in communicating with new people. But after 5 years, Liga and Andrew turned into a married couple who made great plans for the future. And despite the fact that Liga worked in a hotel and led a modest lifestyle, she dreamed of opening her own center of yogic retreats in Portugal. Andrew supported his beloved's idea, and together they saved money for 4 years to fulfill their dream. But fate had other plans. In early 2018, Liga was experiencing the effects of an aggravated skin disease that was causing physical and mental discomfort. To help her sister overcome this ailment and restore her emotional state, her sister Ilse invited Liga on a trip. So in February 2018, Liga and Ilse traveled to Trivandrum, the capital of Kerala, so that Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Kovalam is the premier Ayurvedic resort of Kerala in India. Kovalam, which means grove of coconut palms in Hindi, is a small village offering everything you need for a comfortable and complete rest and treatment. Ayurveda is the oldest system of medical knowledge, which originated more than 5,000 years ago. Ayurveda is based on the universal laws of nature, on the unity of all things in this world. Ayurvedic programs help a person to restore balance and harmony in the body. Panchakarma is the best Ayurvedic program for modern man in Kerala. Panchakarma helps to reboot the body effectively. Most of those who have undergone the Panchakarma course in Kerala repeat it annually, and it is not without reason, as regular Panchakarma not only allows us to get rid of extra pounds, but also adds a couple of decades of healthy life. Since 1985, Ayurveda has been recognized by the World Health Organization as the most effective system of alternative medicine in the world. Let us emphasize that all the promised benefits of Ayurveda are only an alternative, not a panacea for healthy longevity. The 33-year-old Liga and her sister came to Kerala in search of spiritual enlightenment, hoping to be cured of depression in one of the Ayurveda centers. Their treatment tour was scheduled for 6 weeks and included yoga classes, meditation, therapeutic herbal drinks, and nutritional and massage recommendations. The sisters were treated together at an Ayurvedic clinic at Kovalam in Kerala and have already completed their course. On the morning of March 14th, Liga refused to go to yoga class with her sister, explaining that she had a headache. When Ilse returned to her room, Liga was not there. With the help of the hotel staff, Ilse was able to find out that her sister left the hotel around 11:30 a.m. wearing leggings and a yoga t-shirt, hired an auto rickshaw, and went to Kovalam Beach for a walk. The beaches around Kovalam are popular destinations for both domestic and international travelers. The sandy beaches of Kovalam are always crowded. However, Liga could not be found there. Ilse wandered the beach until late at night showing her sister's picture, but never heard the long-awaited response that someone had seen her. This was actually strange, as Liga was a tall white girl who definitely stood out, and if she was actually on the beach, someone should have seen her. After searching unsuccessfully, Ilse went to the police station to report her sister missing. However, the Indian police officers did not show any sympathy for the missing foreign tourist, but on the contrary, complacently asserted that they would surely find the girl who had strayed, or she would surely return the next day. They were not even deterred by the fact that Liga, according to her sister, had psychological problems and could be an easy target for criminals. The Potencod police registered a case, but the investigation started coldly, or rather it is more correct to say did not start at all. Ilse Skromane had traveled extensively in Kerala. She had been to Kollam, Varkala, and finally came to Kovalam. She considered herself a very experienced traveler in India, and this time she took her sister with her to show her the India she loved so much. But the trip turned tragic. After a few days of inaction by the Indian police, Ilse started searching on her own. She enlisted the help of friends and also reported Liga missing to her husband. Andrew flew urgently to India. The police investigation intensified after the missing person's husband. Andrew, Jordan, and Ilse contacted the local press and started an online campaign to find her. Ilse also reached out via Twitter to India's Foreign Minister, Sushma Swaraj. "Please help! My sister, a Latvian citizen, has been missing for 8 days. We are very worried," she wrote. The desperate sister announced a reward of 100,000 rupees to anyone who could help find Liga or provide any information about her movements that day. Ilse and her friend Alexa, who had also traveled to India after hearing about Liga's disappearance, put up posters in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Together, they put up flyers and distributed them to people. Numerous locals took an active part in the search for the missing tourist. The important fact remained that Liga suffered from depression and had a hard time interacting with strangers. On the day of her disappearance, she hired an auto rickshaw to reach the beach and was never seen again. She had about 1,000 rupees with her but no passport, so she could not leave the country. Ashok Kumar, head of the local police station, said that the police had no leads in the case. The police kept saying that the tourist had gone on a bender or eloped and would soon return on her own. However, regular, persistent requests for help from Ilse and Andrew forced the police to search for Liga. The search operation was conducted in the Kovalam beach area where Liga Skromane was last seen. Police assumed that she had drowned, just as the unidentified body of a woman was found washed ashore at Kula Chal in Kanyakumari district. Investigators examined the body along with the missing woman's sister, but the latter did not identify it as her sister. The version of drowning was not confirmed, and the search for Liga continued. Andrew, on the other hand, was convinced that his wife had been kidnapped by local gangs for the purpose of selling her. He tried to infiltrate these gangs to get more information, but was exposed and warned that repeated contact with the gangs would result in him having to leave the country. A month after Liga went missing, there are still no leads to help find the girl. Ilse continued to look for her sister. She visited Kovalam Beach every day and watched people. On one such day, she spotted a boat and she had a theory. The only way to leave the beach unnoticed was the boat. On April 17, 2018, after a forced hiatus, Andrew returned to India to continue his search. Ilse and Andrew entered a new struggle to find the Skromane League, but the body was still not found. The search was complicated by the fact that Liga Skromane was a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry said the embassy was in constant contact with Liga's relatives and was also working closely with the Indian police. The Latvian embassy also appealed to the Indian Foreign Ministry with a request for special support in the search for Liga, as well as the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose consular district includes the region where Liga disappeared. At the request of the Kerala state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force will search for missing Latvian citizen Liga Skromane. The search operation involved an M-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boat, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. But even this search operation did not bring the desired result, and Liga was still not found. The search continued. By this time, all local residents knew about the missing tourist from Latvia. They supported and sympathized with Andrew and Ilse. On April 20th, 2018, Ilse's phone received the longest-awaited yet most horrific call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew drove to the designated spot where the police were waiting for them for the boat crossing. Ilse's heart was pounding like never before. She felt that for the moment, she would have to swim the path that the League had traveled to its demise. On the spot, horror overwhelmed her. Ilse saw her sister's clothes. The shirt and leggings on the body were recognized by Ilse, but the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained unclear how, with whom, and why Liga had gotten to a place that could only be accessed by going through Panatura from Samudra Beach. 2 women confirmed that they had witnessed Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But why would a girl who is being treated for depression and is already alone take a boat to a remote place in the forest? The body was shifted to the Medical College Hospital where it underwent an autopsy, which was captured on video camera. The police said they could not confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was completed. According to the city police commissioner, the body was badly mutilated, with a head lying nearby. Police have tentatively identified the dead woman as missing tourist Liga Skromane. In favor of the investigators' conclusions is also the fact that the victim was identified by Liga's relatives by her hair and clothes. One of the versions of rescue services in India was poisoning. There are poisonous pong-pong trees in the mangrove forest, and she could have accidentally or intentionally eaten their fruit and poisoned herself. Between 1989 and 1999, more than 500 people died from poisoning by its fruits in Kerala alone. It looked like another nonsense, because the person was hanging upside down, but there was no head. It is obvious that if Liga was poisoned, her body would have been in a completely different position, and the head would have been in place. The Indian authorities were talking utter nonsense. Based on the information about Liga's complex psychological problem, the investigators also assumed the version that Liga had voluntarily left her life. Ilse feared that the police would try to pass off her sister's murder as a voluntary departure from life. Although a rope had been found at the scene, and it could be concluded that the hiker had hanged herself, Ilse demanded a separate explanation for the missing head. "Don't tell me it's lost," Ilse said sarcastically in yet another appeal on the internet. Breathlessly, Ilse and the anxious public waited for the results of the forensic tests. The forensic results were overwhelming. The forensic report stated that there were areas of blood pooling in part of Liga Skromane's brain, as well as bruising in the neck area. The autopsy revealed that the woman had been strangled by several people. She was killed in an attempted violent attack. There were external injuries on the body, probably sustained during the struggle. The fact of violence could not be confirmed as the body was in the decomposition stage. There were characteristic injuries on the cartilage in her throat, which indicated that someone had squeezed her throat with force. The trauma was severe enough to be fatal. According to forensic experts, there were blood clots in her brain which confirmed strangulation. They also noted that there were bruises on her neck and legs. A total of 9 wounds were recorded on Liga Skromane's body. In view of the above, the police no longer considered the version of voluntary death. According to the autopsy, it was determined that Liga was murdered. Liga died after resisting or struggling. Ilse breathed a sigh of relief and hoped that the police would soon find her sister's killers. But there were complications as well. As part of the investigation, the police began checking out local drug dealers and card players. In addition, during interviews with local residents, 2 women said that they saw Liga walking alone to the place where her body was later found, but the police said they did not fully trust their words. Meanwhile, Liga's relatives have accused Indian police of incompetence, claiming that if the girl had been searched for immediately, the tragedy could have been avoided. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is believed to have been grabbed from a nearby beach and transported by boat before being strangled. A special team of investigators has begun looking for those responsible for the crime. About 40 suspects were interviewed. However, arrests were planned to be made a few days later after the law enforcers had enough evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men who were eventually accused of killing Liga Skromane. Police revealed that Liga Skromane was lured by 2 men who then abused her before dismembering her body. The alleged assailants, who are now in custody, are local dealers in illegal substances. The suspects fully confessed under torture. Both the accused were pimps and were also dealing in illegal substances. Police said the autopsy did not reveal much evidence because Liga's body was badly decomposed. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court calling for a review of the felony murder case. He believed that more people were involved in the woman's murder. In the petition, he pointed out that both defendants later recanted their pleas of guilty to the crime. According to Jordan, the men may have confessed because they were tortured, which, as it turns out, is a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband, Liga Skromane, a review of the case. Due to lack of direct evidence, the trial was postponed for 2 months. But Andrew was outraged by this attitude of the authorities. He had earlier accused the Kerala authorities and police of incompetence and attempts to cover up Leia's murder so as not to scare away tourists. Both the suspects' lawyers asked for and got a postponement. By law, they have the right to postpone the case once without giving any reason. The more they postponed, the more he was convinced the case was unclean. However, both suspects were in custody. Investigation revealed that 32-year-old Umesh and 28-year-old Udayakumar offered Liga Skromane weed, and when she was drugged, they used it and then strangled and decapitated her. It is noted that the two men apprehended for the murder of Liga Skromane and had previously committed similar crimes on numerous occasions. Both of them worked for a food delivery company in the Kerala capital and earned money as illegal tour guides in their spare time. Umesh and Udayan had been charged with destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The place where Liga's corpse was found and had earlier served as a pleasure ground for Umesh. He used to take men there. 13 criminal cases have been filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have testified against him. Liga Skromane, along with both men, were seen in the area by several people. They were initially silent, but confessed to everything after the body was found. The detainees confessed to police that they'd committed the murder while attempting violence. They were apprehended, but had previously claimed that they had only seen Liga Skromane in Kovalam. The men pleaded guilty after repeated interrogations. On December 6, 2022, the court finally sentenced both men to life in prison. The court also recognized that the criminals must pay compensation to Liga Skromane's sister Ilsa, 165,000 rupees each. We would like to note that there has been a whole series of such crimes in this country recently. Young girls are regularly subjected to violence. The problem of crime in India is very acute. Due to the huge number of sexual acts against minors, the government has introduced the death penalty. It is also worth noting that if the relatives, and primarily Liga's sister, had not been persistent, had they not involved the press by organizing a press conference and an influential MP, it is obvious that the local police would hardly have seriously investigated the case. For at first a theory was put forward that the League had allegedly passed away voluntarily, and as it now turns out, this is not the first incident in this very place where Liga was found. After this story, I would like to warn once again all women who are frivolous about the dangers of traveling alone in India. Do not seek spiritual enlightenment in distant, dangerous, and uncharted countries. Take care of yourself. Why was the beauty queen robbed of her life? They say beauty is a powerful force capable of saving the world, but unfortunately, it does not guarantee happiness and can sometimes lead to trouble. Beautiful girls are always the center of attention, usually with many admirers. However, renowned beauties and crowned beauty queens are not only surrounded by fans and patrons, but also by many envious people, ill-wishers, and obsessed stalkers capable of unpredictable actions. The case of the tragic demise of the young Kimberly Olivera shocked all of South America, becoming one of the most shocking and resonant. The girl, who won several beauty contests and was a contender for the title of Miss Brazil, was brutally and treacherously deprived of life. She dreamed of fame and recognition, but they turned out to be very different from what the model had imagined. Her name indeed became widely known far beyond her native country, and people admired Kimberly's beauty and youth. At the same time, they were horrified by the terrible manner in which she ended her life in the prime of her years, and by the many heights she could have still reached. Who was Kimberly Olivera? Kimberly Karen Mota de Olivera was born on February 26, 1998, in the small yet cozy Brazilian town of Manacor, located in the municipality of the same name in the state of Amazonas. She was the eldest child and the only daughter in the family of Naila and Jose Olivera, and was raised alongside her 2 younger brothers. The girl had Brazilian, Spanish, and Indian roots, and it can be said she won the genetic lottery. She possessed incredibly attractive looks that drew the eyes of those around her like a magnet. Kimberly had flawless skin, luxurious thick hair, a dazzling smile, and a slender feminine figure. The beauty was used to universal attention, admiration, and adoration, with her peers and adults alike comparing her to an angel. From a young age, she engaged in dance and gymnastics, loved swimming, and meticulously took care of her appearance and manners. At the same time, she excelled in school, read a lot, regularly visited the theater, and studied foreign languages. Already in her teenage years, Kimberly began participating in various beauty contests, where she won prizes and also modeled in advertisements and clothing catalogs. In high school, she firmly decided she wanted to connect her life with the modeling business, especially since her mother Nayla was also a recognized beauty in her youth and won several titles, including Miss Manicure. However, Nayla later married and sacrificed her modeling career for the sake of her family and raising 3 children. Kimberly realized she had outstanding physical attributes and loved to pose in front of the camera. She was featured several times in fashion magazines, participated in shows, and won the official title of the most beautiful girl in her hometown. She also reached the finals of the Miss Amazonas contest in 2017, prepared to participate in it again, and was a serious contender for the title of Miss Brazil. In case of victory, she could have gone on to prestigious contests like Miss World or Miss Universe. However, Olivera understood well that to win at such a high level, beauty and charisma alone were not enough. Contestants there are also evaluated based on their intelligence, education, moral qualities, charitable activities, and so on. Additionally, contenders for the Beauty Queen crown must not have criminal records, legal issues, or photo shoots in the nude style. Kimberly actively managed her social media accounts, where she promoted a healthy lifestyle, sports, and proper nutrition. She also detailed her life, posted shots from various photo shoots, and simply interacted with her growing number of followers. By 2019, her page on a popular social network had several tens of thousands of followers. The model aimed to be a role model, inspiring and motivating her followers. At 19, she decided to pursue higher education and aimed to enter medical school to become a dentist. To achieve this, Kimberly moved to Manaus, the capital and largest metropolis of the state of Amazonas, where her maternal uncle Henry lived. After successfully passing the necessary exams and enrolling in the university, she moved from a quiet, cozy place to a huge, bustling city, settling in her relative's house. Olivera quickly adapted to her new environment, made friends, and successfully combined her studies with sports, advertising shoots, and participation in various projects. Persistent and cunning admirer. In her free time from studies and photo shoots, Kimberly usually spent time with her friends, often hanging out in various places as a large group. In the fall of 2019, Kimberly and her close friend were enjoying themselves at a popular club when a handsome young man named Rafael Fernandez Rodriguez approached them. He wanted to get to know Olivera and offered to buy her a cocktail. However, the model, accustomed to the heightened attention towards her and knowing how to handle such situations, politely declined, noting that she was not alone and didn't need anything. Rafael simply apologized for the disturbance and left, but the girl didn't yet know that this entire scene was premeditated and orchestrated by the stranger. The fact was that the man had been following the young model's social media page for about a year, closely observing her, but never attempting to make contact until that day. He knew well the places the beauty frequented and decided to act, pretending to see her for the first time and merely wanting to meet her. At that time, Rodriguez was 31 years old, recently divorced, and obsessed with the idea of meeting and starting a romance with Kimberly. Learning from posts and stories that the model had moved to Manaus, he also moved to the city, where, having a legal education, he quickly found a high-paying job in corporate law and rented a spacious apartment in an elite residential complex. Then he began implementing his plan, closely monitoring Olivera, waiting for the right moment to approach her. After the unsuccessful attempt to meet at the nightclub, Rafael decided to step out of the shadows and started sending the girl private messages on social media, inviting her on a date. He also actively commented on and liked all the posts the model shared on her profile. For several months, she ignored the persistent follower, paying him no special attention as she regularly encountered similar situations and this guy didn't particularly stand out. Rodriguez then changed his tactics, adding Kimberly's classmates, friends, and even relatives to his friends list, trying to befriend them and gain their trust. This plan succeeded, and he managed to obtain her phone number from one of her close acquaintances. The obsessed stalker then began messaging her in instant messengers, suggesting they meet. The man studied the object of his admiration well, knowing what she liked, where she went, what music she listened to, and so on. He started attending outdoor training sessions occasionally conducted by Olivera herself, and only there did he manage to catch her attention. They finally talked, and after that, they began regularly calling and messaging each other on social networks. Raphael managed to pique the girl's interest as he was well prepared. Despite a significant age difference of almost 10 years, an easygoing friendship developed between the young people. The man cautiously approached, trying to court and please the girl beautifully without scaring her off, but also not letting her forget about him. His tactic worked perfectly, and in March 2020, Kimberly and Raphael declared themselves a couple and started officially dating. Obsessed owner, the attractive and romantic guy who did everything to win the beauty's affection, revealed his true colors as soon as they began dating. He started literally monitoring his beloved's every move, wanting to know everything about where she went, whom she communicated with, who messaged her, and so on. Initially, the girl even found it amusing, as no one had ever restricted or controlled her before. However, the situation worsened daily, and Raphael's behavior became increasingly intrusive and aggressive. He now decided which photos Kimberly could post on social media, when and if she could go live, whom to respond to and whom to block. Soon she grew tired of this, attempted to set personal boundaries the guy couldn't cross, and they had a serious argument. Rodriguez had to apologize, and to make amends, he invited the girl to a luxurious restaurant and gave her a huge bouquet of flowers. He repeated this after each quarrel to avoid losing Olivera, whom he had pursued so long and persistently. The man gave her expensive gifts, organized romantic dates at trendy spots, and said he would never leave her. Kimberly increasingly complained to her friends about her boyfriend, saying she couldn't take a step without his permission and approval. Raphael forbade her from talking to guys even at the university, took her phone without permission, checked calls and messages, and then created scenes. Sometimes, he got so furious that the girl feared for her safety. Her friends confirmed this was abnormal, advised her to have a serious talk with the guy, and if nothing changed, to leave him before it was too late. Kimberly also understood she didn't want to live like this, knowing a brilliant modeling career, diploma defense, world travels, photo shoots for fashion magazines, fame, and recognition awaited her. She didn't want to give it all up for uncertain relations with an unstable and obsessed owner who restricted, controlled, and sought to possess her like an object. Final decision. By early May 2020, after 2 exhausting months of relationship, Kimberly decided to break up with Raphael, but was unsure how to do it without triggering his anger. She waited for the right moment to announce the breakup, but it was no longer possible to delay. On May 10th, Brazil celebrated Mother's Day, a holiday Kimberly always spent with her mom. However, due to restrictions imposed by the raging COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, she couldn't travel to her hometown to congratulate her mother. Instead, Kimberly posted a photo of them together with a touching caption and words of gratitude. At the time, Nayla was in the hospital undergoing treatment after being diagnosed with cancer. After posting, Kimberly went for a run in the park with a few friends, including Raphael. Everyone who saw the couple that day claimed they weren't arguing, were talking nicely, and no one except her close friend knew that the model planned to break up with her boyfriend that evening and had already made her decision. At noon, Kimberly called her uncle and told him she would spend the day with her best friend Gabriella, but would return home to sleep. Later, she called Henry again, asking him not to lock the front door because she forgot her keys and promised to be back by midnight. Henry did as asked and went to bed, fully trusting his niece. In the evening, while at her friend's place, Kimberly rehearsed what she planned to tell her boyfriend. She carefully chose words to avoid hurting his feelings and to prevent any outbursts of anger, although it was very difficult. Finally, she seemed to have found the right delicate phrases and was ready for the important conversation. Around 9 in the evening, Raphael arrived at her friend's house in his brand new white Audi. Kimberly walked out to him with a smile, waved goodbye to Gabriella, and got into the passenger seat next to the driver. No one saw the girl alive again. Mysterious disappearance of the couple. On the morning of May 11th, when Henry woke up, he realized his niece hadn't come home and became very worried. Kimberly always told him when she would return and informed him if she planned to stay over at a friend's place. He tried to contact her, but her phone was off. He then called Gabriella, who said that Kimberly left with her boyfriend and hadn't been in touch since. Henry called Raphael, but he didn't answer, which was very strange. It soon became clear that the girl didn't show up for her university classes, something she had never done before. By noon, convinced that his niece was missing and no one had seen her, Henry went to the police to file a report about the disappearance of the girl and her boyfriend. However, the authorities just laughed at him, saying Olivera and her boyfriend were adults and could go wherever they wanted without telling anyone. Henry and a few friends of the missing girl began searching on their own. They first went to Raphael's apartment, but no one answered the door. His car was also missing from the parking spot. Everything indicated that the couple had indeed gone somewhere together, but Kimberly's close ones knew she would never disappear without telling anyone. By evening, Henry called his sister Nayla and told her what had happened. He didn't want to worry his relative, who was battling a severe illness, but he couldn't wait any longer since she had also been trying to contact her daughter all day and suspected something was wrong. He tried to reassure her that nothing bad could have happened to Kimberly since she didn't keep bad company, had no harmful habits, and avoided trouble. Kimberly's friends began massively posting her photos on their social media pages and various groups, asking for any information about the girls or her boyfriend, Raphael's, whereabouts. Since the young model was quite a popular figure, news of her disappearance went viral, and thousands of followers joined the search. However, this yielded no results. Grim discovery in a locked apartment. The police only began to act on May 12th, nearly 2 days after the couple's disappearance. A search warrant was obtained for Raphael's apartment, as it might contain clues or hints about the whereabouts of the young people. But what the authorities discovered when they forced open the locked door and entered the premises shocked everyone. Kimberly was in one of the rooms, but unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done to save her. The lifeless body of the young girl lay on the bedroom floor in a large pool of her own blood, covered with a sheet. There were also several large bloodstains on the bed, and blood traces and smears on the carpets and floor coverings were found in almost every room. It was evident that the criminal had panicked, trying to cover up the evidence, but soon realized it was futile and simply fled, turning the air conditioner on full blast to slow down the body's decomposition, so no one would suspect a body was in the apartment. The forensic experts found 4 stab wounds on the victim's body, 2 to the chest and 2 to the neck. The weapon used was a large kitchen knife, which lay in the next room with traces of blood and clear fingerprints of the criminal. The perpetrator didn't even try to get rid of it or wipe off the traces, but just threw it on the floor. Judging by the absence of defensive wounds or signs of a struggle on the body, the girl was most likely attacked suddenly when she least expected it. It appears the attack happened on the bed, but she was finished off on the floor with a blow to the neck, severing her carotid artery. The apartment owner was nowhere to be found, and his documents, some personal items, bank cards, and car keys were missing. The state of the rooms indicated he had left in a hurry. If Raphael was previously considered missing, he was now reclassified as the prime suspect in the brutal crime. But where to look for him, and could he have left the country by now? Hunt for the fugitive criminal. The forensic examination confirmed that the fingerprints on the crime weapon belonged to the missing Rodriguez. No traces of other people were found in the apartment. At the time of the crime, only the criminal and the victim were present. dispelling any remaining doubts about the man's guilt. Alerts about Raphael were immediately sent to police stations across the state and circulated widely on social media, noting that a dangerous criminal was being sought and requesting any information about his whereabouts. Additionally, a search was launched for the white Audi that the suspect drove. Detectives understood that every minute counted, so they checked all reports from vigilant citizens. On May 13th, news came that a white Audi was found crashed in a ditch by the roadside in the neighboring state of Caracaray. The car, as it turned out, belonged to the suspect. Surveillance footage showed Raphael driving at high speed. It seems he lost control. The car veered off the road and overturned. However, it was unknown how badly the driver was injured and where he went. There was speculation that he might have hitchhiked to the Venezuelan border and fled there. Failed attempt to cross the border. It was soon learned that the injured man in the accident was indeed picked up by a passing car and taken to a nearby town. There, Rodriguez took a taxi to the nearest bank, withdrew almost all the money from his account, and then took the same taxi to the border town of Boa Vista. From there, he attempted to cross the border into Venezuela on foot to escape justice. Fortunately, his attempt to leave the country was unsuccessful. Due to restrictions related to the worsening COVID-19 situation, the man was not allowed to pass. He could have returned to Boa Vista, a city of nearly 300,000 people, and tried to blend in, but detectives found out that the suspect preferred to hide in the wooded area, waiting for things to quiet down. After a couple of days of searching, the fugitive was found deep in the forest, in a small hut almost camouflaged by the surrounding environment. However, the arrest didn't go smoothly. The police were suddenly attacked by men wielding machetes, whom Rodriguez had hired from the local population for personal protection, paying them generously in cash. Fortunately, there was no bloodshed, as the authorities showed their badges and explained they were there to apprehend a dangerous criminal. They informed the bodyguards that aiding the criminal could result in serious legal consequences for them as well. Raphael's version. By the time the main suspect was arrested, the police already had all the evidence of his guilt, so denying it was pointless. Surveillance footage showed Kimberly getting into his car, arriving at his place, going up to his apartment, and then Rodriguez leaving alone a few hours later, fleeing the scene. Interestingly, in all the videos, the couple appeared calm, chatting pleasantly and smiling. Raphael left the apartment calmly, clearly not feeling fear, remorse, or guilt. Under the weight of evidence, the suspect admitted his guilt, but presented a rather strange version of the events of that day. According to him, he and his beloved decided to have a romantic evening and went to his apartment for that purpose, where they had intimate moments. Afterward, Kimberly went to take a shower, and Raphael decided to check her phone, finding out she had been chatting with several guys on social media. He wanted to confront her directly about it, but first went to the kitchen and took a large knife, hiding it under a pillow. He claimed he did not intend to harm her, but only wanted to scare her if she tried to deceive him. When Olivera came out of the shower and lay on the bed, Raphael immediately started questioning her about whom she was communicating with. The girl just smiled and said she wasn't talking to any men. This infuriated Rodriguez. He realized his beloved was lying and mocking him. He grabbed the knife and quickly inflicted 2 blows to her heart. The victim didn't have time to understand or resist, but slipped off the bed onto the floor, where the attacker delivered 2 more fatal blows to her neck. Realizing what he had done, Raphael tried to cover up the traces, but quickly understood it was futile. He couldn't remove the body from the apartment unnoticed, and the suspicion would still fall on him. So, he simply covered the body with a sheet and turned the air conditioner on full blast to keep the room as cold as possible, slowing the decomposition process. Witness testimonies. Kimberly's best friend, Gabriella, testified as a witness, providing a completely different version of events. According to her, Kimberly had finally decided to break up with her aggressive and mentally unstable boyfriend that evening. She had spent a long time carefully preparing what to say, knowing that one wrong word could send Raphael into a rage. Gabriella insisted that Kimberly would not have been intimate with a man she planned to leave, and certainly wouldn't have joked about messaging other guys, knowing his reactions were always unpredictable. Another witness was the defendant's ex-wife, who confirmed that Rodriguez was a cruel person who suffered from uncontrollable fits of anger, affecting everyone around him. His aggression was the primary reason for their divorce. Raphael's only supporter was his mother, Fatima, who claimed that he was a good person and never meant harm to anyone. She blamed Kimberly, her ex-daughter-in-law, and everyone else for driving her boy to sin. Lenient sentence and its aftermath. Rodriguez's father did not live to see the trial. Realizing what kind of monster he had raised, the elderly man chose to end his life by stepping in front of a train. His widow insisted it was an accident, saying her husband felt unwell and accidentally fell onto the tracks. However, surveillance footage clearly showed otherwise. The defendant's legal team pushed the narrative of his insanity, repeatedly delaying the case by requesting new psychiatric evaluations. Ultimately, Raphael was deemed capable of standing trial for his heinous act. The trial began in October 2021, nearly a year and a half after the brutal crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his guilt, Raphael received a surprisingly lenient sentence of only 14 years in prison, later reduced by another year. This outcome was due to the defense's successful argument that their client had acted in a fit of rage when he committed the crime. As a result, instead of life imprisonment, he received a significantly lighter punishment. On the day of the sentencing, October 28th, Kimberly's mother, Nyla Olivera, passed away after a long battle with cancer. She had followed every court session via video call from her hospital bed, where she was in very poor condition. Just a few hours after the verdict was announced, her heart stopped. The Olivera family lost two beloved members in less than a year and a half. First their cherished sister and daughter, then their loving wife and mother. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's mother vowed to wait for her son to be released from prison, as he was the only close family she had left after her husband's death.
An unequal marriage and a crime for millions. People who are madly in love with money but do not know how to earn it themselves can be extremely cunning and dangerous. They easily cross the boundaries of morality, ethics, and law. For them, there are no friends, relatives, or loved ones, and they are capable of any betrayal, even a crime, for money. Such was the case with a seemingly charming and sweet woman named Celeste. The case of Celeste and Stephen Beard in the early 2000s shocked the United States of America and was later widely covered in the media of other countries. The story began in a typical manner. An elderly millionaire decided to marry a young beauty who worked for him as a maid. Friends, relatives, and business partners advised Mr. Beard against this step, but he was blinded by love and genuinely believed that his feelings were mutual. Stephen was the fourth of 5 legal husbands of this cunning and greedy woman. She never loved him, but only saw him as a source of her own enrichment. In various ways, the wife forced the millionaire to change the conditions of their marriage contract so that, in case of his death, she would receive as much money and property as possible. To hasten her husband's demise while deflecting suspicion from herself, Celeste used a woman who was in love with her. Early years of Stephen Beard. Stephen Beard was born on August 11, 1924, in Dallas, Texas. He was the only child of a woman named Dolores, but never knew his biological father. He was always very close to his mother, who worked multiple jobs to provide everything necessary for her son. Stephen's childhood and youth coincided with the difficult times of the Great Depression and World War II. After finishing high school, the young man tried for some time to find a job in advertising, but soon realized that without education, it would be very difficult to get a good job, so he studied to become a marketer. However, he did not have time to apply his knowledge and practice, as he went to war, serving in the Navy until 1945. During the war years, Stephen gained an engineering specialty, but despite this, he could not find a decent job in peacetime.
He managed to get a position as a sales consultant in a small shoe store in his hometown of Dallas, where he earned a very modest salary, barely enough for the essentials. Nevertheless, Stephen later called that period the happiest in his life because he was young, full of strength, enthusiasm, and faith in a bright future. Most importantly, during his time working in the store, he met the main woman in his life, his wife, Alice Adams. The girl was 2 years younger than him, possessed striking looks, a slender figure, and was trying to build a career in the modeling business, but abandoned her ambitions to devote herself to her family. The young couple, deeply in love, got married in 1948, just a couple of months after meeting, and a year later, their eldest daughter was born. In 1950, Alice gave her husband a long-awaited son, and 3 years later, another boy was born. Their family was strong and loving, where everyone cared for and supported each other. From janitor to millionaire. In the early days of regular electronic television broadcasting, Stephen dreamed of working in the industry, but his path was challenging and filled with obstacles. In the late 1940s, he managed to get a job at one of the studios, but only as a janitor. However, the young man did not give up, continued searching, and soon luck smiled upon him. He was offered a chance to try his hand as a host of an entertainment program on a radio station, and he eagerly accepted the offer. After several years of hard work, Beard became the producer of a popular television program. His income rapidly increased, and he felt right at home in the field of mass communications and information. Stephen became an excellent specialist in advertising and entertainment content promotion, developing new ideas and brilliantly bringing them to life. He worked with many different people, made many useful connections, constantly improved himself, and strove to improve the world. By the mid-1950s, Stephen was successfully engaged not only in advertising and producing TV projects, but also invested the money he earned in real estate and started selling cars. By the age of 40, Stephen had earned his first $1 million and had no plans to stop there. In 1974, at the age of 50, Beard managed to win a tender together with the television company he founded. The businessman, along with his wife and 3 children, moved to Austin, the capital of Texas, where they bought a luxurious mansion with a large pool. Their home was located in one of the most prestigious areas of the city, covering almost 5,000 square meters. The couple joined an elite local club, membership in which cost them over $50,000 a year, but by that time, such an amount was insignificant for them. The Beards achieved incredible heights, raised 3 children, gave them an excellent education, and now simply enjoyed life. Alice continued to take great care of her appearance, exercised, and despite her age and having 3 children, maintained a slender figure. Meanwhile, Stephen rapidly gained weight and refused to do anything about it. He joked that his physique matched his social status and income level. All his wife's attempts to get him to exercise and watch his diet were met with promises to consider her advice. By the early 1990s, Beard's fortune had exceeded $10 million. The businessman and his family had virtually everything money could buy. The couple acquired their own yacht, traveled extensively, doted on their grandchildren, and were incredibly happy. It seemed that this happiness would last forever, but suddenly, tragedy struck their home. Illness and death of Alice Beard. In early 1993, Alice sought medical help due to severe migraines that had been constantly tormenting her. A thorough examination revealed a cancerous tumor in her brain. Treatment began immediately. One of the best neurosurgeons operated on Mrs. Beard, and she was prescribed expensive medications that were hard to obtain. Her husband spared no expense on innovative therapy, which offered some hope for recovery. Alice's diagnosis was a shock to the entire family, but they supported her and believed in the best. It seemed that their love, care, and advanced treatment technologies yielded results, and after 6 months, she went into remission. In August of that year, they went on a cruise to relax, celebrate their 45th wedding anniversary, and the victory over the illness. It was a wonderful, romantic, but unfortunately, their last vacation together.
By late September, the insidious disease returned with renewed vigor and began to progress rapidly. Neither the best specialists nor experimental therapy could help Alice. She passed away on October 13th, 1993, at the age of 68. For her family, it was an irreparable loss and a pain that nothing could alleviate. Period of depression and new love. After the passing of his beloved wife, Stephen fell into a deep depression. He lost interest in his business affairs, spent a lot of time at the bar of the upscale country club, sitting alone, drinking heavily, and just passing time to avoid returning to his empty, enormous house. By then, his children had long grown up and moved away, and his grandchildren only visited during holidays, leaving the millionaire in the mansion surrounded only by his numerous housekeepers, cooks, gardeners, and other staff. The man was visibly withering away. As a family man, he desperately needed a kindred spirit, care, and companionship. His relatives and friends were convinced that he needed a woman who would support him and be a source of comfort during such a difficult time. However, Stephen was not ready for a new relationship. At that moment, he couldn't even imagine loving someone else again. In early 1994, Beard met an attractive young woman named Celeste Martinez, who had started working as a waitress at the country club's restaurant a couple of weeks before their first meeting. She was a pretty, smiling blonde, very sociable, and able to attract attention. She was divorced and was fighting her ex-husband for custody of their twin daughters. Celeste was experiencing financial difficulties, had many debts, and told pitiful stories about her tough life. Stephen became a sympathetic listener and quickly grew fond of this girl. He genuinely felt sorry for her, wanted to help her out of her difficult situation, and offered her a job as a maid in his home, which she gladly accepted. Thus began a rather predictable romance between the elderly millionaire and the cunning beauty, who was almost 40 years younger than him. Who is Celeste Beard? Celeste Mary Johnson, maiden name matching her fifth husband's surname, has carried several surnames over time: Ratcher, Wolf, Martinez, Johnson, but became globally notorious under the surname of her fourth husband, Stephen Beard. She was born on February 13, 1963, in Culver City, California. Nothing is known about her biological parents, as her mother abandoned her immediately after she was born. At 2 days old, she was adopted by Nancy and Edwin Johnson. The couple had spent many years unsuccessfully trying to have their own children, but Nancy had repeated miscarriages, which led to a nervous breakdown that later developed into prolonged depression and resulted in a mental disorder. In the late 1950s, the Johnsons adopted 2 boys. In 1963, they took in Celeste, and a year and a half later, they adopted another girl. Over the years, Nancy's mental condition worsened and became increasingly unstable. The couple frequently argued, and their adopted children were unwilling witnesses to these fights. Nancy sank deeper into depression, repeatedly attempted to end her life, and even wanted to harm the children. Many years later, Celeste recounted that her most frightening childhood memory was bath time when she and her sister were in the bathtub, and their mother suddenly pushed their heads underwater, holding them there for a while before letting go. Nancy claimed she was just rinsing their hair, but the sisters were convinced their mother had tried to drown them, but then reconsidered. After this incident, Nancy was admitted to a psychiatric clinic following another nervous breakdown, leaving Edwin to care for the 4 children. He tried to be a good father and take care of his charges, but in her teenage years, Celeste openly accused him of constant molestation and abuse, which she claimed began when she was only 11. However, her words were hard to trust, as this story repeatedly changed, gained different details, and later, the blonde even alleged that her older brothers also committed acts of intimate violence against her. Pathological liar. Soon, the Johnsons separated and began a court battle for custody of their adopted children. Nancy claimed her husband was an alcoholic and accused him of domestic violence. Edwin, on the other hand, argued that the children couldn't be left with their mother because she was dangerous, and due to her mental issues, could harm herself and them at any moment. Celeste didn't want to stay with either of her adoptive parents, but in court, She testified against her father, accusing him of molestation, aggression, assault, and even armed attack. According to her, when she was a child, Edwin struck her in the head with a knife, causing her to nearly bleed to death. When asked to show the scar, she initially said it was hidden by her hair, then forgot where exactly she had been hit. Eventually, she claimed the scar had disappeared with age. Celeste constantly fabricated stories about her past, portraying herself as a victim. She understood this was the easiest way to attract attention, elicit pity and sympathy from others, and get what she wanted. During her teenage years, Celeste was extremely temperamental, behaved aggressively and sometimes irrationally, leading her to be taken to a psychiatrist. She was never diagnosed, with the conclusion being that it was just a difficult adolescence compounded by an unhealthy family environment. Celeste went through several more foster families, but never settled anywhere. Thanks to her striking appearance and brazen behavior, Celeste was very popular with the opposite gender from a young age. She often skipped school, preferring to spend time with boys in bars or on the beach, and in high school she dropped out altogether. Marriage to Craig Bratcher and birth of twins. At 16, Celeste met a young man named Craig Bratcher, who was only a year and a half older than her. They quickly started living together, and less than a year later, Celeste became pregnant. In December 1980, the couple had a modest wedding, and soon after, their twin daughters, Jennifer and Christina, were born. The young parents were unprepared for family life, domestic responsibilities, and raising children. They constantly argued, and Celeste didn't want to change her lifestyle. She spent her time in bars and clubs, leaving the children with Craig. She repeatedly accused Craig of domestic violence, assault, and forcing intimacy, trying to portray herself as a victim, secure a divorce, and receive monthly payments from her ex-husband. Celeste again accused her husband of abuse when he caught her in bed with a lover and threatened to end their lives. She managed to get Craig sent to jail for several months, although no one was actually harmed during that incident. The couple divorced in the spring of 1982. Celeste filed for child support and even obtained a restraining order against her ex-husband. However, she continued to regularly leave the children with him so they wouldn't interfere with her social life. New fleeting marriages. After the divorce, Celeste wandered from one rented room to another, living off alimony and welfare, stubbornly refusing to work. She constantly took men to court, accusing them of harassment and violence, hoping to get some compensation. Celeste had no interest in her children and simply gave them to a foster family to avoid having them interfere with her lifestyle. When her ex-husband found out, he was shocked. He managed to gain custody of the children and took them in. Soon after, Celeste convinced him to try living together again. He agreed, but the reunion was short-lived. A couple of months later, Celeste again accused him of violence and took him to court. Craig even agreed to take a lie detector test, which showed he was telling the truth. After the breakup, the parents split the children. Jennifer stayed with her father, while Christina went with her mother. In 1986, Celeste married for the second time to a serviceman named Harold Wolf. But this marriage didn't last long. Despite Harold treating her and her daughter well, life with the unstable Celeste proved unbearable. She constantly argued, threatened to end her life, and even called Harold's superiors, complaining about him, nearly ruining his career. Almost immediately after the divorce, Celeste married again. Her third husband was a wealthy top manager named Jimmy Martinez. The couple bought a spacious house in Austin, but Celeste nearly bankrupted her new husband by spending his money recklessly. When he realized she had drained his accounts and put him in debt, he tried to talk to her, but she cut her wrist with scissors. After that incident, Celeste was sent for mandatory treatment in a psychiatric clinic. The therapy did her some good, and she calmed down a bit, but it didn't save her marriage to Jimmy. She also accused her third husband of domestic violence, but he managed to have all charges dropped. Immediately after that, he filed for divorce. Fraud and incredible luck. In the early 90s, Celeste faced charges of insurance fraud involving her car. She had burned the vehicle in the desert to collect a large payout, but her scam was soon uncovered. A case was opened, but Celeste got incredibly lucky. At the hearing, she encountered a sympathetic judge who sentenced her to community service and a fine equal to the insurance payout instead of prison time. Celeste needed money, so she got a job for the first time in her life. Thanks to her striking appearance and natural charm, she was hired as a waitress at an exclusive country club, where she soon met a widowed millionaire whom she quickly began to woo. Stephen felt sorry for her and invited her to his home, which was a huge stroke of luck for her. Celeste couldn't cook or do housework, so she did everything she could to make others do these tasks for her. She quickly gained the trust of the elderly man, taking advantage of his kindness and generosity. Soon the millionaire started taking his young companion out, introducing her to his friends and partners. By then, Beard's friends were already worried, seeing how cunning and greedy this woman was. However, the businessman wouldn't listen to anyone because he was simply captivated by the beauty. But Celeste was only interested in his money, and the man himself irritated her. In conversations with her daughter, she called him unflattering names, noting that he was fat, old, and disgusting, but she was willing to endure it for financial gain. Even Celeste's ex-husbands, upon learning what was happening, tried to warn the man about who he was involved with, but he didn't believe them. Beard proposed to her, and she naturally accepted right away. However, the businessman's close friends managed to convince him to at least draw up a prenuptial agreement to retain ownership of his property and control his wife's spending. Family life and extravagant spending. On February 18, 1995, the couple officially legalized their relationship. As a wedding gift, Celeste received $500,000, had access to her husband's accounts, and was set to inherit $1 million upon his death. After the wedding, her daughter Christina moved into Beard's luxurious home, and a year later, after their father ended his life, Jennifer also moved in with her mother and stepfather. Celeste treated her husband with contempt, trying her best to undermine his health and hasten his demise. She made it a tradition to drink strong alcohol at dinner, adding sleeping pills to Stephen's drinks and food so he would fall asleep, allowing her to go out to entertainment venues. Meanwhile, she constantly thought about how to change the prenuptial agreement to maximize her inheritance after Beard's death. She convinced her husband to sell their house and buy another, arguing that she felt uncomfortable living where Stephen had spent many years with Alice. In reality, the scheming blonde wanted property acquired during the marriage. But this wasn't enough, and she began spending money from her millionaire husband's accounts. In the first month of their married life, Celeste spent over $100,000 on entertainment, shopping, and other personal needs. Her husband was bewildered, as no matter how much money he gave her, it was never enough. Moreover, Celeste stole and pawned jewelry that had belonged to the late Alice. When Stephen found out, he was so furious that he wanted not only to divorce her, but also to send her to jail. However, Celeste begged for forgiveness, telling him about her debts and the need to pay a fine for the insurance fraud case. The man believed her, helped pay off her debts, and decided to keep the marriage. Attempted murder. On October 2, 1999, around 3 a.m, a frightened man called emergency services, unable to explain what was happening. He said he woke up from a sharp burning pain in his abdomen, saw that his clothes and bed were covered in blood, and his internal organs were literally spilling out, which he was holding in with his hand. The man also said his wife was somewhere in the house, but he couldn't call out to her and was just bleeding out in his bedroom. The caller was Stephen, who truly had no idea what had happened to him, but understood that without immediate help, he would die. Fortunately, within minutes, paramedics and police arrived at the mansion and saw a horrifying scene. An elderly man sat in a chair covered in blood, holding the phone in one hand and trying to stem the blood flow from his abdomen with the other. They asked him if he had recently undergone surgery and if his stitches might have come apart, to which he responded negatively. Soon, Celeste and Christina appeared, seemingly unaware of what was happening, but they remained calm upon learning about the incident.
They confirmed that Stephen had not undergone any surgeries, and he was taken to the hospital. This is where things got interesting, as it turned out that the businessman had been shot in the stomach while he slept. In his bedroom,
Police found a shotgun shell on the floor and sealed the room as a crime scene, declaring it an attempted murder. The first suspect was Mrs. Beard, but she claimed she was in another wing of the mansion at the time, and her daughters corroborated her story. Soon it was revealed that during her second stay in a psychiatric hospital, Celeste had met a woman named Tracy Tarleton,
who was also a patient. They quickly developed a close relationship, and Celeste hinted that she would leave her husband if it weren't for him being a tyrant. Tracy took these words as a call to action and decided to remove the obstacle. Investigation, trial, and sentences. Tarleton didn't even try to hide. The shotgun she used was found in her home. Celeste vehemently denied her involvement, claiming that this woman was obsessed with her and acted alone. The accused chose to remain silent. Stephen survived, gradually recovered, and was soon discharged home. However, on January 22, 2000, he suddenly passed away due to a blood clot that had formed after the gunshot wound. Now, Tracy was no longer charged with attempted murder, but with the crime itself. Yet she remained silent until July of that same year, when the newly wealthy widow Celeste married Cole Johnson. Almost immediately after Celeste's fifth marriage, Tracy began testifying against her. She admitted her guilt in Stephen's death, but noted that she was driven to such a desperate act by her lover, who had promised they could be together after the man's demise. However, after eliminating her old husband with someone else's hands and inheriting his fortune, Celeste quickly married another man. Celeste denied all accusations against her, but everyone testified against her in court. Even her own daughters, who confirmed that their mother never loved her fourth husband and wished him dead to inherit his wealth sooner. Tracy made a deal with the prosecution and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. She was released in August 2011. In the spring of 2003, Celeste Johnson was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole no earlier than 40 years. It was revealed that she also planned to get rid of Tarleton and was seeking a criminal to silence her lover and avoid punishment. Blind rage. Did you know that with the arrival of the holidays, the number of incidents increases? Crimes, assaults, robberies. During Christmas and New Year holidays, law enforcement officers register hundreds of crimes. What is this fact connected with? Firstly, the celebrations are accompanied by mass consumption of alcohol. People lose the measure of drinking and accordingly erase the established boundaries of behavior. Even those who have not committed atrocities before lose control. The list can also be supplemented by those who have mental deviations. When the spirit of unity, peace, and love permeates everything around, this category of society feels especially lonely and depressed. By committing criminal acts, sociopaths compensate for their moral state. In this way, they resolve accumulated internal and external conflicts. On January 25, 2022, the funeral of 26-year-old Elle Edwards was held at St. Nicholas Church in Wallasey, Merseyside, England. To see the beautiful young woman off on her final journey came several hundred people. The body of the young woman was delivered on a karate catafalque drawn by 4 white horses. Her unexpected and ridiculous death could not be accepted by the family's siblings, and the cold-blooded crime, which occurred in full view of everyone, did not leave the lips of concerned citizens for a long time. A man stopped in the parking lot near the pub Beacon, located in Wallasey. The local establishment had a special flavor and was full of visitors on Christmas Eve. For hours on end, the stranger kept his eyes on the entrance to the establishment. He felt that this was the most opportune moment for revenge. In the run-up to the festivities, the attention of many would be lessened. This meant that if he carried out his plan, he would be able to get away unnoticed. When at last the target appeared on the horizon, he fired. With a sense of satisfaction, the perpetrator started the car and fled the scene. On December 24, 2022, there was no sign of trouble. The city atmosphere was filled with magic. Everyone was preparing for the upcoming holiday. The streets were not crowded. In search of missing products, some residents were actively shopping in stores. Those who had not yet bought gifts strolled through shopping centers. However, most citizens were at home with their families. Christmas is a time of gatherings and cozy company. The Edwards family was also involved in the pre-holiday hustle and bustle. In addition, everyone was waiting for Lucy, one of the daughters of the family. To meet the upcoming holidays with her family, the girl flew in from Dubai. Her sister Ella was especially looking forward to Lucy's return. They were close in spirit and kept in touch despite the distance of thousands of miles. When the joyful moment of meeting occurred, the girls decided to cross paths with friends at the local pub, Beacon. There they had a great time. They danced and sang and karaoke, joked and laughed a lot. It was calm and peaceful as never before. However, the general merriment was broken by loud clapping. "Are those fireworks?" someone asked in the crowd. No, the atmosphere of celebration was disturbed by someone's madness. At 11:50 p.m., 12 gunshots rang out at the entrance to the pub. The bullets hit 5 people, 4 guys, and 1 girl. Ella Edwards suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Someone familiar with her attempted to give her artificial respiration, but the efforts were futile. Elle's condition was deteriorating. The injuries were too severe. After calling emergency services, ambulances arrived at the scene of the shooting. Having examined the victims, the medics made a preliminary conclusion. The 22-year-old suffered leg injuries, the 24-year-old guy was wounded in the arm, and the 33-year-old man's wrist was injured. The condition of 26-year-old Ella and the 28-year-old guy was deemed critical. On the way to the hospital, the unfortunate woman, without regaining consciousness, passed away. Ms. Edwards' injuries proved incompatible with life. Only a few hours before the crime, Elle had been talking to her father. "I was busy with Christmas preparations when the police reported what had happened," Tim Edwards later recalled. "It came as a real shock to our family. Everyone who knew Elle found it hard to believe what had happened. After all, she was so young and beautiful for her early demise. Did she really have ill wishers in her entourage who were capable of such a thing?" Ella Edwards was a very beautiful and cheerful girl. She worked as a beautician in a local beauty parlor and also worked part-time as a dental assistant. Despite her young age, she was established in life and had a good income. She was very goal-oriented and had no plans to rest on her laurels. Ella was not deprived of male attention. Nature awarded her with outstanding external data. Her friends noted that in addition to external beauty, her inner beauty stood out. She was very kind and positive. The character of Ms. Edwards allowed to find a common language even with the most capricious customers. For what the employee was on good account with the management. Thanks to the love of beauty and makeup, the girl was waiting for a brilliant future. However, life ordered otherwise. At the first stages of the investigation, there were no clues. The intruder attacked us suddenly as he disappeared. At the scene of the crime, he left only shell casings and victims bleeding. Detectives knew one thing for sure. The attack was planned. Police needed time to determine if Ellie was the target of the attack or was a random victim. For the most part, law enforcement officials were leaning toward the idea that the girl was among the victims by accident. Detectives interviewed the victim's family to get a better understanding of the victim's personality and the specifics of her life. All spoke positively about the girl and frankly did not understand that someone could have attacked her intentionally. From their words, the deceased had no enemies. Ella was very beautiful. Perhaps there would even be those who envied her or wanted to be close to her. However, it is unlikely that the crime occurred on the basis of envy or jealousy. The Edwards family's words reinforced the police's speculation. The fact is that recently in the city has become not uncommon cases of strife between rival criminal groups. Sometimes, as a result of their use of firearms, innocent citizens suffered. Afterwards, the victims and witnesses of the incident were interviewed. It took a long time to check cell phone service. Officers also recovered CCTV footage from the pub. The investigation was to examine them. The authorities also contacted the media. They called on people with information to help bring those responsible to justice. Above all, this involved providing video footage from mobile devices that had been taken on the night of the incident. Any of them could show the car in which the attacker arrived. City officials held a meeting with local residents. First and foremost, they wanted to support and reassure concerned citizens. The next goal the meeting had was to convince eyewitnesses to share the data they had. It was possible that someone might have seen the moment of the attack or even known the perpetrator. A group of volunteer activists was organized who went door to door and talked to citizens. The result of the work was not long in coming. It was soon established that the attacker left the pub parking lot in a dark Mercedes A-Class. CCTV cameras also showed that having pulled up to the establishment, the offender waited for some time. Apparently, he was choosing the most convenient moment for the attack. When Elle and other young people were outside, he fired shots. After that, he quickly got into a car and drove away. It was possible to establish the moment of the crime and the fact that the attacker was alone. However, it was not possible to determine where the intruder went, so detectives went door to door interviewing the residents. Hoping to identify the attacker, they described the vehicle and the circumstances of the incident. All city streets were patrolled around the clock. On December 25th, the funeral of the murdered girl was held. Despite it being Christmas Day, the site of the victim's last funeral was closed as a sign of grief and remembrance for the victims. The owner of the Beacon pub left a message on his social media page with words of support for the family of Ellie Edwards. On the same day, her father laid flowers at the door of the establishment. "To my beautiful Elle, the light of my life, you will always be with us," he whispered. Already on December 26th, two suspects were detained. They were a 19-year-old Rock Ferry resident and a 30-year-old man from Tranmere. The woman was taken into custody on suspicion of conspiracy to commit a felony. 2 days later, another arrest was made against another Tranmere resident. The 31-year-old man was also suspected of conspiracy to commit a felony. At the time of his arrest, the two earlier arrestees remained at the station. The names of the detainees were not released due to lack of direct evidence. All three were soon released. The police failed to prove their involvement in the crime. The locals were angry at the rampant crime and the impotence of the police. Therefore, the detectives were forced to issue a statement again. They said that the investigation would continue until the culprit was identified and punished. It was still assumed that the shooting at the Beacon pub had been caused by a feud between local gangster clans, and the unfortunate Elle Edwards was seen as a random victim. On December 30th, law enforcement reported that the 3 male victims had been released from the hospital and the condition of the critically wounded 28-year-old had finally normalized. On January 3rd, 2023, police reported that about 150 pieces of data were obtained during the investigation. Among them was some very important information. It was found that the bullets fired by an unknown person could have been intended for Jake Duffy and Kieran Salkeld. The boys were part of a local gang. The group could not share a territory where illegal substances are traded with a rival clan. According to information obtained from closed sources, the two were seen scuffling on December 23rd. Apparently, the two did not take the fight that took place as a looming threat to their gang. Therefore, the next day the bandits went on vacation to Mayak. By their appearance there, they put the other visitors in the gunman's crosshairs. At the same time, thanks to video surveillance systems, managed to track the car on which the criminal left the scene of the crime. However, the intruder was ahead of the detectives. New Year's Eve turned out to be as turbulent as Christmas. The police station received a report of a fire near the Beacon pub. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a car matching the description of the wanted vehicle. Despite the fact that the vehicle burned out completely, the examination confirmed its identity. Apparently, the perpetrator knew that the police were on the trail, so he set the fire in order to destroy the evidence. It was also possible to establish that the car was stolen. On January 11th, The total number of people suspected in the murder of L. Edwards rose to 5. Detectives said they had made an arrest of a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman from Wirral. On January 13th, police announced the capture of the perpetrator of the shooting. He turned out to be Connor Chapman. Despite his young age, the boy was well known to police in the criminal world. He had a long record of robbery, hooliganism, threatening behavior, and aggravated carjacking. The latter offense was a real star attraction as he made headlines in many newspapers. He has been charged with several offenses in the current case. At the same time, the 23-year-old woman who was detained was released on bail. The investigation continued. It turned out that on the afternoon of December 24th, there was a scuffle between two rival groups. The cause was an area near a wooden church located in Beechwood. The altercation was very violent, but no compromise was reached. Somehow, Chapman became aware that several of his enemies were celebrating Christmas Eve at a local establishment. Instead of spending his first Christmas outside of prison in 4 years with his family, Connor opted for revenge. So L. Edwards really was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Chapman wasn't acting alone. Investigators managed to find out the name of another defendant in the case. It was 20-year-old Thomas Waring. The guy was taken into custody. He was charged with possession of firearms and assisting a criminal. During a search of Thomas's home was found significant evidence for the investigation. It was a videotape taken before the incident. It shows Connor picking up a gun and saying he was going to get even with someone. After the shooting, the perpetrators hid the stolen car. Later, in order to confuse the investigation, they ordered a cab under an assumed name. At around 5 a.m., the criminals returned to the place where they had hidden the Mercedes. In order not to waste time eliminating traces, they decided to get rid of the direct evidence in the case. As for Connor Chapman's identity, it was criminalized from a young age. He was born in Birkenhead, Liverpool. He was raised by his grandparents. The boy was abandoned by his parents at an early age. Since the teenager studied poorly, he dropped out of school shortly before his exams. In general, Connor has always been a problem child. Therefore, special hopes for the guy did not lay on neither teachers nor relatives. Chapman committed his first crime, shoplifting, at the age of 14. In 2016, he committed a carjacking. In 2017, another theft was joined by possession of a controlled substance. For the past 2 years, Chapman has been under police supervision and had restraining orders. However, he was more than willing to violate them. He was eventually deemed a danger to the community, so they restricted his access to several parts of the city. In 2018, he violated the ban again. Connor was in a restricted area. He also had a knife and illegal substances on him. That same year, the public heard about him for the first time. His sorry excuse for stealing a car became an anecdote among the local population. 18-year-old Connor had no intention of getting on the straight and narrow. Last time he stole an Audi. When a patrolman on the streets of the city noticed the stolen car, he ordered the driver to stop. Chapman, however, had no intention of obeying the officer's instructions. With all his might, he pressed the gas. He only provoked a chase. Along the way, the guy committed other offenses on the road. He ended up crashing into a curb. The car was thrown sideways and spun around. As a result, the carjacker was forced to leave the cabin. After not traveling a great distance, the runner was caught. The patrol caught up with Connor in the bushes. In his defense, he said he was expecting a buddy. His phrase later became a catchphrase. At trial, the defense fiercely argued for Chapman's freedom. The defense argued that the guy was under the influence of bad company, and also claimed that he was diagnosed with ADHD and a number of other mental disorders. This report was issued by a private specialist during the trial. The lawyer insisted that Connor was innocent and needed to be released. Thus, he was sentenced to 8 months in juvenile prison. Upon release, he was also brought a driving ban. This was a fairly minor punishment for a repeat offender who had 14 convictions for 30 criminal episodes. The young criminal clearly had no intention of stopping and spit on all societal rules. In January 2220, Connor went on trial again. This time, he was sentenced to 10 months in prison for being caught in a public place with pockets full of illegal substances. After serving his sentence, he was arrested again for 5 episodes of the offenses. At the same time, Chapman boasted of questionable accomplishments. He proudly claimed that he spent more time in prison than he did on the outside. Eventually, by the time he was 20 years old, he had received 19 convictions for 43 felonies. 6 months before the horrific incident at the Beacon pub, Connor was tried again. The lawyer insisted that the guy had realized everything and was finally ready to reform. Chapman himself confirmed the words of the stitch-up. As mitigating circumstances, the lawyer cited the impending birth of Connor's girlfriend. Pressing on pity, he said that the first child was born when the guy was behind bars. At the time of the last trial, the police were aware that Connor was in a gang and selling illegal substances. However, oddly enough, he was only tried for burglarizing a house and stealing a couple of electric motorcycles. Perhaps there was corruption involved in the case. At least the high-priced lawyer worked off the fees he was paid. Amazingly, everyone recognized that the guy was dangerous. At one time, law enforcement officials even made a statement on television telling the public to be wary of Connor. After committing a crime, he would serve his sentence and then be released again. It's a vicious criminal cycle. However, there was no good reason for Chapman's isolation. Most likely, it was due to the fact that no one was seriously hurt by his actions. The public was extremely indignant about the gaps in the law. It appeared that nothing could be done with hardened criminals until they maimed someone or killed them. On June 13, 2023, the trial of Connor Chapman began at Liverpool Crown Court. 12 members of the Edwards family took part. Prosecutor Nigel Power announced what the defendant was charged with. Chapman pleaded not guilty to all charges. The fact that the guy was caught on CCTV footage, he tried to deny. Connor this time said that, on the night of the attack, he was at home wrapping presents. He was also evasive about the stolen car. At first, he denied stealing the Mercedes. Connor claimed that the car belonged to his gang. Later, he said that he had burned it because he had learned that one of his associates had committed a crime with the car. As sufficient evidence had been collected, his lie was obvious. The trial lasted 3.5 weeks. During this time, all the circumstances of the crime were established. The real reason for the shooting on December 24th in a local pub was rage and revenge, which Chapman could not control. In fact, he didn't care who got in the way at the time of the massacre of Jake Duffy and Kieran Salkeld, members of a rival gang. Prior to that, he had acquired a Scorpion submachine gun. The weapon could fire about 15 shots in less than 1 second. Connor jumped into the stolen car and drove to the Beacon. Before firing the shot, he kept surveillance for 3 hours. In the meantime, the security camera captured Elle happily socializing with friends. She even left briefly to go into another pub before taking her sister Lucy home and returning again. At 11:47 p.m., the girl showed up outside again to have a smoke. To her misfortune, she found herself next to Chapman's targets. At this time, Connor was just in the parking lot. His long brown hair was visible on camera, as well as his face covered by a hood or balaclava. A short time later, as he heeled toward his car for further escape, he fired 12 shots. The resulting wound rendered Ella unconscious and fell on top of Salkeld. Thus, Elle Edwards received bullets that were not meant for her. After the attack, Connor was going to flee to Spain, but literally at the airport was detained by law enforcement officers. To cover their tracks, Chapman and Waring set fire to the car and got rid of the weapon, which, by the way, was never found. However, traces of Connor's DNA were found on one of the shell casings, which indicates that the defendant loaded the gun before firing it. During the search of his home, red gloves were found which were clearly visible on the pub's CCTV footage. They were also found to have his DNA on them. All of these facts linked Chapman to the massacre that took place. By the way, while the perpetrator was awaiting sentencing, both of his attack targets were behind bars. Before the jury of 5 men and 7 women went to discuss the verdict, Tim Edwards was given the opportunity to speak. He said he had been forced to view CCTV footage before the trial. "It's horrible to see your daughter die and not be able to prevent it. I will never forget it. Ellie was in the street with her back turned to her perpetrator," the father reported. He added that if the shots had come 6 inches up or to the side, his Elle would still be alive. Ella's father hoped the final verdict would be fair and the perpetrator would never again be able to spend Christmas with his family on the loose. It took the judges 3 hours to come to a unanimous decision. On July 7, 2023, Connor Chapman was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 48 years. The Edwards family was happy that the cold-blooded criminal would be behind bars for the rest of his life. The convict cynically committed the crime and did not even think to repent of it. It was proved at the trial that the pub shooting was the culmination of a feud between the Woodchurch and Beechwood estate gangs on both sides of the M53. Thomas Waring was also found guilty of all charges against him. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison by the court the same month. Such a short sentence was probably due to the fact that the lad, unlike Chapman, had little criminal experience. The public was outraged. Innocent citizens were once again caught up in criminal disputes. They were even angrier that potentially dangerous gang members often served minimal sentences. Prohibitions, which are used by the courts as additional penalties, have little effect. This became particularly evident in the case of Connor Chapman. The lad was subject to a ban on being on the premises where the pub was located, as well as a ban on driving. To ensure the safety of the public, they proved ineffective. The death of L. Edwards was proof of that. The incident highlighted the need for a review of the existing legal framework. In addition, the brazen attack once again highlighted the problem of firearms availability. After several similar deaths in the county of Merseyside, the government has allocated $350,000 to implement a pilot program. It is linked to reducing gun crime across the region. Tim Edwards also announced the organization of a fund to support victims of gun violence. One of the main goals of the national authorities should be to reduce the number of guns in the hands of civilians and criminal gangs. Father L. expressed his views. He also added that carrying weapons, even for children, is becoming the norm. The younger generation is particularly vulnerable to what they see and hear. Mr. Edwards recalled that during his childhood years, he never heard of any of the kids picking up a gun, much less knowing where to get one. In his words, everyone has become very vulnerable in today's society. People are not safe anywhere. An attack can happen in a private home, on the street, or in a crowded place. A prime example of this was the party at the Beacon Pub on Christmas Eve 2022. A celebration that should have been full of joy and warmth for L. Edwards turned into an irreparable tragedy.
You've probably heard more than once about the search for someone who has vanished without a trace. We all, in one way or another, encounter this phenomenon in everyday life. Missing person notices are commonly seen on the streets, broadcasted on TV or radio, and posted on social media. Those missing can be of various age groups, genders, social statuses, and nationalities. Most often, it's the elderly who are being searched for. Unfortunately, senile dementia and other mental disorders in older people can lead to confusion. As a result, they wander off in unknown directions. Children are the most vulnerable population. In most cases, their disappearances are due to abductions. But what about young people? Those who, it seems, shouldn't just disappear. They are healthy and rational. Often, the reasons for their sudden disappearances are violent acts committed against them. Sometimes, to conceal a crime and avoid accountability, hiding a body becomes a simpler solution. There's a legal maxim that goes, "No body, no crime." However, this is with the slight caveat that the guilt of the accused or the defendant isn't confirmed by a totality of other evidence. Strange events. A complex story unfolded in the family of Graciella Garcia from Hermiston, Oregon, USA. The renowned 49-year-old beauty salon owner disappeared on November 8, 2019.
That evening, she planned to have dinner with her 14-year-old son, Jacob, who was at his father's house. Imagine the teenager's surprise when, around 7 p.m., instead of his mother, his stepfather, Romero, appeared at the doorstep, delivering food. Typically, the man wasn't known for his care and attention. He didn't make efforts to connect with the boy, even though they lived in the same house. Nonetheless, Jacob didn't suspect anything wrong. The stepfather explained that Graciella had fallen asleep, so he came instead. After they said goodbye, the boy went to his room and checked his phone. There were 2 missed calls and a text from his mom. When he tried to call her back, he reached her voicemail. Jacob was very worried that his mother didn't respond. It was a bad sign because she was always reachable, especially since they had planned to meet. After a short while, the boy decided to tell his older brother and sisters about the situation. That evening, none of them could get through to her. Everyone thought that the mother had indeed gone to bed early and would get in touch the next day. However, the family was also concerned that her phone was unavailable to clients as it served as a link between them and Graciella. Later, the younger daughter Gabby often recalled a strange conversation with her mother. Initially happy about the meeting, the woman became sad and thoughtful. Then, she seriously informed that the children should know where she kept important documents and money, just in case. Graciella seemed to be worried about something. She showed the safe and shared the PIN code. She also added that the money and the house deed belonged to them, which couldn't be said about her current husband, Cuauhtemoc Romero Sanchez. Gabby was frightened by the conversation. Her mother was healthy and relatively young. She asked her mother what prompted this talk. However, Graciella didn't elaborate. "No one ever knows what the future holds," she mysteriously replied. They never returned to that topic. Surprisingly, over time, the woman's words became prophetic. Gabby often wondered if her mother could have anticipated the tragedy, or if her disappearance was just an unfortunate coincidence. Graciella's journey. Graciella Garcia was born on October 6, 1970 in Mexico. Her family was among the working class. Seeking a better future for their children, her parents decided to emigrate to the USA, where they eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. At the time of the move, Graciella was still very young, so she didn't remember the hardships of changing her place of residence. She graduated from Umatilla High School, which primarily catered to low-income populations. All students there received free lunches and breakfasts. With 66% of the students being Hispanic, Graciella easily found friends among them. Her sociability and natural charm distinguished her. Later, she enrolled in Blue Mountain College in the business department. From childhood, she dreamed of connecting her life with the art of hairdressing, and even better, opening her own beauty salon. Graciella was determined and hardworking. Therefore, she sincerely believed that with the right approach, her plans could be realized. By February 2006, she became the owner of Carre's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she soon became well known in society. Moreover, the salon's owner always looked well-groomed, which only contributed to the establishment's image. She loved her job and had a great understanding of new beauty trends. Therefore, there was no shortage of clients. Over time, some of them became Graciella's friends and were welcome at her home. In general, her name was well regarded among the townspeople. Besides her career success, her personal life was also interesting and full of happy events. Beloved men. In her youth, she met a man with whom she fell deeply in love. He was her first love. From him, Graciella had daughters Annabelle and Gabriella, often simply called Gabby. The couple didn't stay together long. The man left the family. Apparently, his feelings for the woman changed over time. Left as a single mother, she didn't despair but focused on self-improvement and earned a degree in cosmetology. Later, fate brought her together with a man of Mexican descent. He was a kind soul, and Graciella liked him very much. She eventually married him. According to the children, she never regretted this decision. He was attentive not only to her, but also to her children, accepting them as his own. Later, the family was blessed with sons, Arthur and Jacob. Nonetheless, the man still called Annabelle and Gabriella his girls. Gabby recalled considering her stepfather her real father, as he always supported, protected, and cared for them. The couple did everything to ensure their family was united and happy. Raising 4 children didn't distract Graciella from her passion. On the contrary, whenever she went to professional meetings, she took them with her. The family always traveled together, which became a lovely tradition for everyone. Thanks to this, they visited many cities, got acquainted with local attractions and cultural features. Moreover, they didn't forget about their roots, often visiting Mexico. It was a good time for the Garcia family. Everyone tried their best to make the others happy. Unfortunately, after 17 years, the couple separated. The man and woman didn't want to torment each other with cooled feelings. They cherished the respectful relationship that had developed over many years. After the divorce, their interaction remained warm and strong. The father was always in touch with the children and saw them regularly. Graciella shared custody of their youngest son with her ex-husband. The other children were adults and lived separately from their parents. However, they always maintained constant contact with the family, celebrated holidays together, and often consulted with each other. Graciella went through the divorce calmly, not losing her optimism and faith in herself, thanks in large part to her ex-husband. Even during such a difficult period in life, the man behaved honorably and understandingly. Her beauty salon operated as usual, and she dedicated all her free time and energy to its development. Graciella immersed herself in her favorite work, taking a break only on Sundays. She spent this day surrounded by family and close friends. The unexpected visit. On the morning of November 9th, 2019, Romero stopped by Annabelle's, Graciella's eldest daughter. She was surprised by the unexpected visit from her mother's new husband. The man told her about his wife's disappearance. According to him, after meeting with Jacob the previous night, he returned home and lay down next to his sleeping wife. But in the morning, he found she wasn't there. After checking the house, he realized that she had gone somewhere. Romero tried calling and texting Graciella, but she didn't respond. He also explained that he visited Annabelle, hoping she might know something. However, the daughter had no such information. Moreover, she was shocked by Romero's words and his reaction to the situation. He was crying and seemed genuinely distressed. It was odd for her to see him this way, as he had never shown any emotions around them, except, perhaps, indifference. Romero also mentioned that Graciella had been acting strangely lately. He even suggested that she might have found someone else. He didn't deny that his wife might have needed a break from their relationship. In general, he wasn't sure she was genuinely happy with him and considered any reason for her disappearance. Annabelle found the man's words insincere and his tears theatrical. Moreover, she indeed started to worry about her mother as she found his behavior suspicious. Romero had always avoided communication with his wife's children, and suddenly, for some reason, he decided to turn to them. After Romero left, the girl decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Where did the homeowner go? Graciella's children gathered around her house, determined to finally find out what was happening. Her car was parked on the driveway. If she had decided to leave Romero, she surely would have done so in her car. The second thing that caught their eye was the perfect order in their mother's house. Everything was so tidy that it looked overly perfect. Mrs. Garcia loved creative chaos. If she was going somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. She would spend a long time in front of the mirror, choosing an outfit for the new day. She loved her jewelry, yet at first glance, she left all her precious items at home. Graciella didn't even wear her favorite rings and necklaces, which she wore every day, not to mention other personal items. Everyone was concerned about what could make their mother step out in such a state. Their imagination painted terrifying pictures, one of which was fleeing. While going around the house, Gabby found something strange. A large blanket was lying in the washing machine. This could not but catch her attention, as their mother always taught them not to overload the appliances. The blanket was clearly heavy and someone else had washed it. Apparently, Romero himself. It was unlikely he would engage in household chores. Usually, Graciella took care of the house. Then what could this mean? Definitely that he was trying to hide something. However, the man did not comment on this in any way, citing that he does not pay attention to such details. Later, it was established that along with the homeowner, the following items disappeared from the house: passport, driver's license, and mobile phone. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement. Visiting the police station, she was surprised. It turns out, Romero had not informed the police about his wife's disappearance, even though he knew about it since the 9th, or perhaps earlier. Thus, Graciella's eldest daughter was the first to file a missing person report for her mother, the distant personality. So, who was Romero, and why didn't Graciella's family warm up to him? She met him a while after her divorce. Cuauhtemoc Romero Sanchez was one of her beauty salon's clients. Initially, their interaction was based on friendship. Later, the man took the bold step of asking the beautiful and successful woman out. Mrs. Garcia accepted his invitation, and before she knew it, their relationship evolved into something more. When she introduced him to her family, they noted his excessive aloofness and cold demeanor. Annabelle and Gabby shared that they tried multiple times to connect with him, but Romero did not reciprocate. Graciella's children were puzzled by such behavior, but attributed it to individual personality differences, especially compared to their mother's past relationships. They genuinely wanted to understand her partner and the motives driving him. Sometimes he appeared odd and unsociable to them. They couldn't grasp how such a vibrant and joyous woman could fall for someone so dry. Nonetheless, they respected her choice. When their mother announced her upcoming marriage, everyone supported her and shared in the joy of the occasion, especially the girls, because they wanted to see her happy and loved. Romero's arrogance and restraint were noted even by guests on the wedding day. Some even thought he was overly jealous, as he monopolized the bride's attention. When Graciella's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Sanchez treated them with disdain rather than affection and tenderness. It was clear he didn't want to share his wife with anyone, even her family. After that, Graciella's relatives found it hard to conceal their true feelings about the man. Annabelle even openly stated she did not consider him a stepfather, let alone a father. All they wanted was to maintain normal relations, as seen in civilized families. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved in together into Graciella's house, along with her youngest son, Jacob. The teenager shared that shortly after, Romero began acting as if he were the sole owner. According to the boy, the honeymoon period was short-lived. Soon, the family idyll began to crumble. He noticed that his mother initially tried to set personal boundaries, but being non-confrontational, quickly gave in. This seemed to suit Romero, who was quick-tempered and never the first to apologize. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciella conceded to him. Over time, it seemed she realized she had rushed into the marriage. In heart-to-heart conversations, she confessed feeling constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and wouldn't let her go anywhere alone. Yet, she never spoke of wanting to leave the abusive relationship. It appeared Graciella was still in love with him. Everyone began to understand she had tied herself to the wrong man. Moreover, it seemed he was unemployed and living off his wife, as his constant presence at her side was otherwise inexplicable. This greatly frustrated the hard-working Garcia family. Sanchez was a skilled manipulator. He followed her everywhere, monitored her correspondences, and even friendships with her girlfriends were under threat of being disrupted. He either wouldn't let her go, or could unexpectedly show up as if testing Graciella's fidelity. His jealousy was excessive. The heroine became embarrassed by such behavior and ultimately limited her social circle. Her family became the only people she communicated with. This inevitably affected her professional life, as the industry demanded constant contact with clients and attendance at various events. Friends and colleagues noticed that her former cheerfulness had vanished. The always radiant woman now looked sad and worn. It was clear she was unhappy. Her children noticed changes in her mood and appearance. They also observed that she had lost her previous independence. After discussing it among themselves, they once again agreed that they didn't like Romero. However, he was an adult woman's choice, and there was little they could change, especially since they were accustomed to respecting Graciella's decisions. Other relatives also expressed distrust towards the man. At the same time, none of them knew how to help her. The couple's relationship needed professional help, and Gabby once mentioned this to her mother, to which she responded that she would manage her personal life on her own. The noose tightens. In 2018, Graciella announced her decision to relocate her beauty salon to her home, explaining it was more convenient for her. Her family was skeptical about this idea since they had never heard her mention such a plan in the 12 years since the salon's opening. Later, some clients mentioned that Romero often hung around the salon, creating a bit of tension as if the warm and cozy atmosphere had been lost. Some thought Graciella made this move to solve a problem, but others doubted the idea originated from her, suspecting her jealous husband insisted on the move. Nonetheless, the salon owner continued to express her enthusiasm for the long-awaited changes, noting the home-based work allowed her to be close to Jacob and Romero. By the end of the year, she and her husband were remodeling a room for the salon, but the setup unexpectedly dragged on, completing only in May 2019. Despite the closure, her reputation remained intact, and a rumor of the studio's reopening attracted a queue of clients for months ahead, including new visitors. She was thrilled with her professional success, but became increasingly reticent about her personal life. Another incident raised concerns for her safety. Graciella asked Gabby if she could pick her up. When Gabby said it would take some time as she was far away, her mother insisted, an unusual plea for help that surprised Gabby. Graciella claimed everything was fine, attributing her request to a quarrel with her husband. After meeting, they spent time together, and Graciella appeared to relax, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry, suggesting, "Lovers' quarrels are but lovers' renewals." They parted ways, but Gabby remained uneasy, increasingly worried for her mother. Investigation. After Annabelle contacted the police, the relationship between Graciella's family and her husband deteriorated completely. He seemed angered by their decision to inform law enforcement. Romero presented an official version of his wife's disappearance, claiming she decided to take some time alone or had gone to another man and would soon show up. This was his response to anyone trying to clarify the situation. However, the police report did not go unnoticed. Officers launched an investigation, not ruling out that the missing woman could have been a victim of a crime. They first searched Graciella's home, where relatives confirmed only a few personal items were missing, with nothing else raising suspicion. The investigation included interviews with her children, husband, and others close to the family, including her ex-husband, but nothing substantial was learned. All unanimously expressed doubt about Romero's behavior, though he cooperated with detectives, consenting to a home search, participating in interrogations, providing his DNA, and undergoing a polygraph. With no grounds for his arrest, the investigation continued. Analysis of Graciella's phone records pinpointed the last signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9th at 12:30 p.m., after which the phone was turned off. Her bank accounts remained untouched, as did her social media. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all places Graciella frequented were checked, to no avail. She seemed to have vanished without a trace, a disappearance the investigators deemed suspicious. About 4 months into the investigation, Hermiston police made a public statement, revealing no confirmed information about her last sighting. Despite Romero's failure to report her missing, there was no specific accusation against him. This stance by the authorities frustrated Graciella's relatives. Their communication with law enforcement dwindled. Previously updated weekly, contacts eventually ceased. The missing woman's children had to call the station themselves for case updates, public engagement. As of March 2020, there were no advancements in the search for Graciella. The situation was further complicated by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, her family turned to the media, hoping to draw public attention to their ordeal and solicit assistance in gathering any information. They believed that even minor details could be significant. Gabby mainly communicated with the press, expressing her family's frustration over being in the dark for months and criticizing the police for it. She implored the investigators to devote more attention to finding her mother. The Garcia family suspected foul play in Graciella's disappearance, citing several indicators, particularly the condition of her belongings and the strange situation at home. It was unclear who would take such a drastic step against her, as she had no visible enemies. It was evident she couldn't have left on her own. She would have contacted her family to reassure them. Their lack of communication indicated something terrible had happened. In addition to media coverage, posters and flyers describing the missing 49-year-old Latina woman, approximately 1.6 meters tall and weighing around 62 kilograms, with dyed blonde hair, were distributed throughout the city. Suspect nearby? Graciella's children also requested a change in the detective team handling the case, suspecting bias and collusion with Romero. Somehow, these individuals were acquainted with each other. The family voiced concerns over numerous inconsistencies in the case. It was discovered that Sanchez's phone was turned off on the day of his wife's disappearance, and his behavior did not resemble that of a person alarmed by the sudden vanishing of a loved one. The Garcia family demanded the suspect's arrest. The police chief, Jason Edmiston, promptly responded to these accusations, confirming Mrs. Garcia's disappearance as suspicious and possibly involving foul play, although this was just one hypothesis. He assured the investigation remained impartial, guided by evidence and circumstances, and dismissed any allegations of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as unfounded. Edmiston also mentioned the spread of misinformation hindering the investigation and described the case as ongoing and developing, with certain information necessarily kept confidential. Additionally, authorities sought assistance from the FBI. Edmiston expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions without understanding the legal complexities. Meanwhile, Gabby announced a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move perceived as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation, suggesting their inefficacy. On the first anniversary of Graciella's disappearance, her family organized a memorial event attended by friends and acquaintances, reminiscing about her vibrant and cheerful nature. They prayed for her safe return and lit candles, later placing signs outside the police station urging the search for Graciella Garcia to continue. The latest update in the case came in September 2023, when a significant incident involving Romero Sanchez made headlines. He was attacked and severely injured, requiring surgery. Speculation suggested that Graciella's brother, Mason Garcia, had shot the missing woman's husband multiple times. However, the media did not disclose the event's specifics or any legal repercussions for Mason. It seemed Graciella's family had grown tired of the police's apparent inaction towards Sanchez, leading one of them to take matters into their own hands, potentially leading to a more frightening conclusion, a tragic conclusion. Currently, the disappearance of Graciella Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in agonizing uncertainty. This state of not knowing is profoundly detrimental to their health and mental well-being. Over time, one might come to terms with loss, but the difficulty of living in limbo is significantly harder. It remains unknown whether Graciella is alive. Her children are left with nothing but to pray that the situation will soon become clear and that those responsible will face justice. Ultimately, no crime is perfect. Sometimes there's just a lack of motive and evidence. This story unfolded in Washington, in Spokane, the state's second-largest city. Situated along the river of the same name, it's the heart of the so-called Inland Northwest. The city's name originates from the Spokane tribe, translating from the Salishan languages of the local Native Americans as children of the sun. However, in today's world, Spokane is notorious for its dichotomy. As beautiful and appealing as it is to tourists on the outside, it can be just as dangerous for its residents. According to state data, Spokane County has the highest crime rate in Washington, doubling the state's average. Law enforcement reports that a majority of local-level offenses are connected to domestic violence. And so, today's tale of a young Cinderella has a pretty exterior and a bitter taste within. The Holden family, a typical American household, had long resided in Spokane. They adored children, hence the home was always full of them. Judy and John Holden had 2 daughters and an adopted son, Joshua. The adult daughters had left the nest and lived independently for some time. However, their only son, Joshua, remained with his parents. The large, melancholic, and perpetually gloomy young man hadn't managed to start his own family and was thus reluctantly staying in his parental home. The care for children in this family was expressed in an unconventional manner. It began and ended with merely providing shelter. Judy and John didn't spoil their foster children with attention and care. All the foster children lived according to a strict schedule and were punished for misdeeds. The children became a small family enterprise. The desire to have a stable income in the form of significant benefits compelled the Holden family to take not just 1 or 2 children from the shelter. Judy had an educational background and had her own grown children with successful destinies. Hence, the guardianship authorities trusted the family and initially placed children with them for foster care and then, upon mutual agreement, for adoption. Thus, one day, a sweet 4-year-old girl named Courtney appeared in the Holden family. Courtney Corin Holden was born on February 28, 1992, and ended up in the shelter 2 years later. Life in the shelter was not joyful for the girl, as it was for all children there. Every new day in the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of various ages dreamily prayed to the Almighty to give them a mom and dad, and one joyful day, the girl's wishes were fulfilled. Little Courtney went to Spokane. Courtney was just 4 years old when she first stepped into the Holden's home. She started living with Joshua and several other foster children. When the door closed behind her, the girl's dreams of a caring and loving family remained just dreams. If life in the shelter seemed sad and joyless to Courtney, at the Holdens, it turned into a real nightmare. From her early childhood, she was forced to do all kinds of housework. She had to clean the whole house, wash dishes for all the family members after every meal, and if she made a mistake, she was punished. What was especially surprising was that the Holdens treated the other foster children much better, and no one could understand the reason for their hatred of this pretty girl. Judy Holden was already of a considerable age by then, and Courtney became the last child they took from the orphanage. Perhaps it was in this that their inexplicable malice and hatred towards the girl was hidden. Courtney was even forbidden from going outside without permission. People who visited their home often heard Judy and Joshua mistreating Courtney, calling her Cinderella, as if she were a fairy tale character who, in real life, was a stepmother's and evil sister's slave. Courtney found herself in a similar role. However, the girl was very responsive, and over the years living with the Holdens, got used to the harsh conditions. She feared her foster mother, and her brother Joshua instilled terror in the girl with just his presence. He forbade her from socializing with peers. She had no mobile phone or other modern conveniences. She never left the house without necessity and permission. A breath of fresh air, as well as chatting with neighbors, was something she enjoyed only when the house was empty, stepping out into the backyard. Courtney's upbringing was under such conditions. Over time, she grew into an adult and simply got used to her life. She didn't become bitter, but always treated her foster parents with respect, as she knew no other life and had no concept of a normal family. Courtney gained a bit of freedom when Joshua, due to irreconcilable differences with the parents, moved to his sister's place for a considerable time. For Courtney, this was the happiest time of her life. She finally experienced the long-awaited taste of freedom, could freely leave the house, stroll, and meet with peers. Time passed. Courtney finished school and fell in love for the first time. Michael was a worthy partner for her. She felt care and attention from a man she had never received from anyone. After each meeting, Courtney was on cloud nine. Their relationship lasted until 2011 when they had a son. Desperately, Michael pleaded with his beloved to move in with him and live as a full family. But for some unknown reason, the young mother refused him and did not move, continuing to live in the despised Holden's house, and ended all romantic relations with Michael. By that time, the Holden house had become empty. The foster children had grown up and moved out. John Holden, Courtney's foster father, had passed away, so for a long time, she lived only with her foster mother Judy and her child. Michael was allowed to visit his son exclusively with the stepmother's permission. During the period when Courtney's brother Joshua was absent, their life with the little son was quite peaceful. But after the father's death in 2014, Joshua returned and began to fiercely terrorize the family home. He installed many surveillance cameras around their house on Hero Avenue, about a block from Rogers Middle School in northeast Spokane. Signs reading, "Smile, you're on camera," were scattered all over the yard, with several cameras pointing in different directions. The surveillance cameras made Courtney anxious again, as she knew venturing outside would bring trouble from Joshua for escaping. Courtney's life became unbearable once more. Around 2015, Courtney confided to a neighbor that she was once again not allowed to have a mobile phone, manage social media accounts, talk to anyone outside her family, drive a car, or even leave the house without Joshua's permission. The birth of her child had so embittered Joshua Holden that he forced the young woman to cease all contact with her son's father. Courtney silently complied. Neighbors noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms, and when they inquired about their origin, she candidly admitted, "Joshua hits me." Concerned neighbors wondered why Courtney endured such treatment and tried in every way to help her. They contacted the police to draw attention to Courtney's plight, but the Holdens managed to quash the case each time, as the victim herself never openly admitted to being under family terror from her brother. Eventually, Courtney was deprived of the privilege of talking to neighbors, who since then only saw her outside in the evenings, as she was not allowed out during the day. Courtney silently obeyed again. No one knew Joshua like Courtney did. A tall, large, and overweight man, he possessed enormous physical strength and never held back in insults. Joshua's friends described him as a man with a paranoid disposition, cruel and unpredictable in nature. He once bragged publicly about his ability to easily end a life and dispose of the body without difficulty. He had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but due to a lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police, he was released. He was also suspected of an assault and misconduct against a woman in 2003 when the perpetrator could not be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and for burglary. These incidents prompted his flight from the parental home for several years. Upon his return, Joshua became even more ferocious. He installed cameras not just outside but also inside the house to keep complete control over Courtney. The young mother almost stopped communicating with friends, mentioning she was afraid to go anywhere for fear Joshua would find out and things would get worse. One person communicated with Courtney every day through Facebook until Joshua discovered she had an account. "I have to go. I must leave. Josh is coming," she said in her last message nearly 2 years ago. Then, her account went dark permanently. The dynamics within the Holden household were described by family acquaintances as peculiar. People familiar with the family were puzzled as to why Courtney's child referred to Judy as Mom and Joshua as Dad, while his biological mother was mentioned strictly by her first name. This led some to speculate that perhaps Joshua was indeed the child's father. Neighbors and acquaintances condemned the Holdens for their unusual lifestyle and antisocial behavior, opting to steer clear of their home. In August 2018, following yet another dispute, Courtney hastily packed her belongings into a suitcase and ran out onto the street. An irate Judy shouted after her, "Come back home," to which Courtney replied, "I won't stay here anymore." Moments later, an enraged Joshua standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 300 pounds, forcibly lifted 160-pound Courtney and carried her back into the house. Judy slammed the door shut. According to a neighbor, she couldn't resist. This was the last time that this neighbor, and possibly anyone outside the household, saw Courtney. The young woman who had lived a life of invisibility remained so. It took almost 2 years before neighbors and acquaintances started to worry about her disappearance. In October 2019, a year and a half after she vanished, concern for Courtney Holden's whereabouts came from her child's father and his current girlfriend. They hadn't seen Courtney for almost 2 years, and the father was eager to see his child. The father of Courtney's son filed a missing person report with the police. On October 24th, the police, armed with a search warrant, went to the Holden residence and were surprised to find Courtney indeed not there. Neither Joshua nor Judy was willing to cooperate with the authorities. Courtney's stepmother allowed detectives to peek into her room, but then asked them to leave the house as soon as possible. Search dogs were even brought in, but to no avail. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her son and ran away. They couldn't explain who could continue to cash the Social Security benefits deposited into her account or who was using the electronic food stamps. However, on the same day the search was conducted at the Holden home, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. A coincidence occurred the next day when an unknown woman, claiming to be Courtney, called the National Center for Criminal Information in America. She stated she was safe and did not want to be searched for. Police traced the call and identified the woman as one of Courtney's stepsisters. Later, Joshua and Judy told many contradictory stories about Courtney's disappearance. Once they claimed she ran away with a truck driver, and in another version, it was a secret lover she had hidden from everyone. Courtney's absence and the constantly varying statements from those she lived with made the Holdens suspect. Clearly having something to hide, Joshua and Judy Holden hastily left Spokane by the end of October 2019. Their flight only convinced detectives of their involvement in Courtney's disappearance. The Holdens were tracked down in Texas at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. Authorities were able to charge them with cashing benefits intended for Courtney, as well as with identity theft, which allowed for their arrest and detention in a Texas jail. The Spokane Police Department attempted a welfare check on Courtney in early October, but it quickly turned into a missing person case handed over to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser. Lesser spoke with the Spokesman Review about the investigation after the search warrants he filed in the Spokane County Superior Court became public. This report on Courtney's disappearance and the investigation is based on police interviews and court records. Courtney was officially declared missing. Alerts were sent to all states, and several news broadcasts featured the missing person case, initiating an extensive search for her. When patrol officers and detectives visited the home for various reasons, Joshua and Judy Holden refused to cooperate with the investigation, an unusual behavior when it comes to welfare checks and missing persons cases. On the day Courtney was declared missing, a woman claiming to be her called crime check to say she was fine. The police dispatcher also spoke with the woman claiming to be Courtney. Later, it was discovered that it was actually Courtney's sister, who did not tell Lesser why she had impersonated her, presumably to deflect suspicion from Judy and halt the search efforts. "I'm concerned that she might potentially be deceased," Lesser said in an interview with the Spokesman Review. Lesser expressed particular concern about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dropped shortly before trial when the victim ceased cooperating with the prosecution. Investigators were in the process of obtaining DNA evidence, and court documents from that case indicated that Holden was suspected in another assault back in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. A neighbor mentioned that Joshua was unemployed and Judy feared him. Joshua had also been arrested on charges related to unlawful imprisonment and domestic violence, and he had been convicted of burglary. Family members said that Joshua and Judy boasted to them about knowing ways to evade the police, and Joshua made comments about how easy it would be to end someone's life and hide the body. People don't just disappear, especially when they have a child, Lesser remarked. Court documents stated that Courtney was a loving mother who would never abandon her child. Over the 1.5 years, Courtney was not seen outside her home. Joshua and Judy told neighbors and family she was traveling with a boyfriend, an unnamed truck driver nobody met. Sometimes rumors circulated that she had run off with a fiancé. Other times, she was supposedly just inside the house but unavailable for visits. Judy told Lesser that Courtney had been home just a few days before when he knocked on their door in early October. She said Courtney left on foot with her son. When Lesser asked for Judy's phone number, she locked the door in his face, according to court documents. She then reluctantly allowed the police inside to see Courtney's room. She became very nervous, said Lesser. The house was extremely cluttered, with piles of items covering all available space on counters, Lesser wrote in the court documents. Courtney's room was also cluttered, and the mattress was bare. It appeared as though no one had lived there, Lesser observed. At one point, Judy panicked upon losing sight of one of the detectives behind a closed door. She ordered the investigators to leave when Lesser asked to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child. Later that day, a neighbor told Lesser they saw Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leaving in a van with a child. Detective Lesser also found it suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. She received her last prescription in July 2018, though she had been getting medications every month before disappearing. Despite the gap in medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account every month, and her EBT card was used for grocery shopping. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. Cameras also recorded the couple withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. By October 24th, Joshua and Judy had left their home. Lesser wrote that the DVR from the home surveillance system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were gone when police arrived to execute the search warrant. Mobile numbers associated with Joshua and Judy were deactivated in mid-November, but 2 new numbers on the account were activated on the same day with Texas area codes. About a month after the Holdens left, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was one of Judy's daughters and her husband who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They said they hadn't seen Courtney for 2 years and that Judy had retired. The man told the police that Joshua and Judy had a child, but Judy's daughter stated the child was Courtney's. In mid-December, Lesser traveled to Texas in search of Joshua and Judy. The police found them at Judy's daughter's house, along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested on charges of identity theft, interference with custody, and for using Courtney's bank accounts and concealing her child. The child was found safe and was successfully returned to his father. No criminal charges were made against other family members. The police searched Judy's Spokane home with search dogs, but unfortunately found no trace of Courtney. Searches of the home in Texas also yielded no clues to Courtney's whereabouts. Officers also searched a vehicle and trailer owned by Judy, parked at an RV lot in Oklahoma. 40-year-old Joshua and 74-year-old Judy were in jail in Texas, where they declined to be interviewed by the police. They refused to be extradited to Spokane, so the police awaited a governor's warrant for their return. Since the police could not prove their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, they were likely released. This is probably one of the deepest missing person cases, Lesser said about the months-long investigation. I have 4 notebooks full of different information. Judy and Joshua still claim they have nothing to do with Courtney's disappearance, while the police believe she is likely deceased, but unfortunately cannot yet prove it. Domestic violence experts point out several factors why cases like Courtney Holden's are not always reported. One is the social assumption that someone else will take care of it, according to Morgan Colburn, the Director of Counseling, Advocacy, and Outreach at YWCA. Colburn mentioned that fear of retaliation could also be a factor. And sometimes people see it as a family matter, something that needs to be dealt with at home. he said. Despite the aforementioned charges, Judy and Joshua have not been charged with anything directly related to Courtney's disappearance. Many still believe they know what happened to Courtney. In addition to Joshua's known aggressive behavior, he had also stated he could end someone's life and successfully hide the body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is deceased, but they have not made any arrests related to her case yet. Summing up today's story, it's heartbreakingly clear that Courtney was unfortunate to become part of the Holden family, and this young girl, who dreamed of family and love, lacked the courage to stand up for herself. She wholeheartedly believed that even these people, who yelled at her, mistreated her, and forced her to work for them, were her family. But should one really need to defend themselves from their own family? It's a profound regret that the bold claims made by Joshua Holden in public about being able to end a life and hide a body cannot be used as evidence of his involvement in Courtney's disappearance. Especially since after that fateful evening, when he forcefully took her back into the house, she was never seen again, and no one knows what she had to endure in those dreadful moments and what atrocities were committed behind closed doors by these monsters who called themselves parents. There are countless ways to discreetly dispose of a body using various chemicals that neither experts can identify nor police dogs can detect. This suggests that if Courtney was harmed that evening, her spirit still lingers in the Holden estate, where she sought a family, but found her demise instead. Her young son was removed from the Holden household and placed under the care of his father, where he remains to this day. Courtney Holden is still listed as missing. If you have any information that could aid the investigation, please contact the Spokane Police Department.